Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. This would be treated as an A rank mission. I have said before that we would do missions below A rank, however I deem you ready for this mission, which is why we are going to the location. He finished everything in one go, giving them answers to any questions they might have, and the team pressed forward. Ren, who had pulled out a map of the elemental nations, examined the layout and asked, why Cloud? Wouldn't the Mist Village be a more likely suspect? They're much closer, and their shinobi are better suited for water-based operations. The Cloud shinobi would have had to travel a much greater distance over the sea. Utakata responded without missing a beat. The Mist Village has locked its borders. No shinobi have been seen leaving the water country for some time now. He paused before continuing. Ever since the Nine Tails incident, the Cloud has been aggressively probing Hidden Leaf Village's defenses, looking for weaknesses. They've tried multiple infiltration routes already, but this is the first time they're coming in from the east. Even though we are almost certain it's Cloud behind this, there is still a small chance it could be the Mist. Ren nodded as he processed the information, his mind working rapidly. There's still a year left before the Cloud sends a team under the guise of a peace treaty to kidnap Hinata. This must just be another reconnaissance attempt. But they wouldn't be foolish enough to think Hidden Leaf Village wouldn't react, especially when this is the last untested infiltration route. It's likely that both Hidden Leaf Village and Cloud have their own hidden agendas in play. I need to be careful not to get caught up in the schemes of those old men on either side. Team 1 continued their rapid travel through the dense forests, maintaining a steady pace until nightfall. When the sky turned dark, they finally stopped to rest in a dense forest area, where the thick canopy provided a natural cover. Utakata gave a quick order, eat a ration pill and rest. I'll take watch duty. We move again in 2 hours. The 3 Gainans immediately took out their ration pills and consumed them without complaint. Then, securing their sleeping bags to the tree branches, they entered a half-sleep state light enough that they could wake up instantly if necessary. 2 hours passed in silence before Utakata's voice called out, "Wake up." At the sound of his command, the 3 Gainans' eyes snapped open, and within a minute, they had already sorted their supplies and were back on the move. They didn't stop until morning. As the sun began rising, Utakata pulled out a small piece of cloth and handed it to Hitoshi. This has chakra residue from Joan and Akira. Hitoshi took it, and his Kikaiku immediately swarmed over the fabric. A moment later, he released them, closing his eyes for a few seconds as they spread out into the forest. I found a trail, Hitoshi confirmed, turning toward the east and leading the way. The team moved swiftly through the trees, following the trail until they neared a clearing with 2 visible camps. When they were about 100 meters away, 2 sharp whooshing sounds broke the silence, and suddenly, 2 figures appeared in front of them. Reacting instantly, Ren and Yujao moved into position to protect their healer, Utakata, and censor, Hitoshi, as they had trained to do in combat formations. However, before they could engage, Utakata's voice cut through the tension. Stop. The 2 figures remained on guard as they faced Team 1. One was wearing a Hidden Leaf Village Jonin uniform, and the other was dressed in traditional robes. Utakata stepped forward, reaching into his vest and pulling out the mission deployment form he had received before leaving the village. Passing a small amount of chakra through it, the paper turned a faint green color. Without a word, he handed the form to the Jonin in the traditional clothing, a man with his Byakugan activated. He wore his headband on his head, which means there is 90% chance that he belongs to the branch family. The Hyuga Jonin scanned the document carefully, confirming its authenticity, before nodding toward the man in the Hidden Leaf Village Jonin uniform beside him. The 2 then relaxed their stances. The Hidden Leaf Village Jonin spoke first. I am Izumo, Border Patrol Officer. He then gave a short whistle, and 3 shadows flickered into place behind him. These are my team members Shoin Yuzuka, Inko Yamanaka, and Koichi Ibrahim. A young boy, a girl, and another boy stepped forward, saluting Utakata. Utakata gave a brief nod in response before gesturing toward his own team. My students, Ren Takahashi, Yujao Yuzuki, and Hitoshi Ibrahim. Finally, The Hyuga Jonin spoke, his expression calm and composed. Haruto Saratobi, Sora Utatane, and Aoi Mitakato. Now, at the border patrol site, the assembled Hidden Leaf village force consisted of 3 Jonin, 6 Chunin, and 3 Geinin. Utakata glanced at the 2 Jonin and asked, "Any injuries?" Both men shook their heads. "Good," Utakata responded. "Then my team will rest for 2 hours before we start the operation." The 2 Jonin nodded in agreement, and with that, Team 1 set up a small tent, where the 3 Geinin immediately lay down to sleep. Meanwhile, Utakata disappeared into the trees. 2 hours later, they were awakened by Utakata. For a shinobi, even a short power nap was enough to regain peak combat readiness, so they quickly got up and stretched. As they stepped out of the tent, Ren took the opportunity to observe the other 2 teams. The Hyuga-led team had members from the Saratobi clan and 2 minor clans, the Utatane and Mitakato clans, which belonged to the elders of the village. The clan status is divided in 3 categories in Hidden Leaf Village, which are ordinary, minor and great clans. The level of Utatane and Mitakato clans barely reached ordinary clan level, however due to the positions of their leaders they were granted the status of a minor clan. Ren suspected they were placed together as part of some political arrangement by the oldies in the Hokage office. Meanwhile, the border patrol team was built for recon and support, with Nara, Inuzuka, Yamanaka, and Ibarame members filling strategic roles. The border patrol units had 2 teams. One like the ones they were interacting with, and the other was a combat-focused team. However, once a war ended, it was compulsory that the combat unit was not within 20 km of the border. However, nearly every village had a way to circumvent this rule, so it wasn't really important. It is likely that the combat team for this unit has different orders, which is why they were not present here. Despite their serious mission, the entire camp atmosphere was unusually relaxed, as if they were on a casual training drill. It was a psychological tactic for making the enemy feel uneasy, as if they were the ones forced to hide, not the other way around. Which was true in this scenario, since the Cloud team was trying to infiltrate, so they do have to hide. As Ren, Yujao, and Hitoshi emerged from their tent, a few Chunin cast brief glances in their direction before turning away, saying nothing. Yujao noticed this right away, sounded slightly excited as she muttered, "Whoa. Are they ignoring us on purpose? Trying to make an example of us just because we're younger than them?" Ren raised an eyebrow. "You sound excited about that. Shouldn't you be annoyed?" Yujao shrugged. "Well, I've read stories where older ninja look down on the younger ones, only to get their faces slapped when the younger ninja turn out to be way stronger than expected and they understand they have offended Mount Tai. I don't understand some words like Mount Tai, but I think I understand the meaning." Her eyes gleamed with anticipation as she cast another glance at the Chunin before looking back at Ren. Ren instantly felt a headache coming on. "What?" Yujao huffed. "You wouldn't understand, Fang Yuan." Ren's entire mind went blank for a second. Who the hell is Fang Yuan? His expression darkened as he thought, is someone spreading those ridiculous novels in this world too? No. I have to stop the cancer from spreading. Shaking his head, he ignored Yujao's antics and turned to Hitoshi. "Let's go talk to the Chunin," he said, striding toward them with Yujao and Hitoshi following behind. As Team 1 approached the Chunin group, the conversation among them quieted slightly, and a few heads turned toward the approaching Geinin. Ren looked at their levels. 3 of them were in the 30s range, 2 in the 40s, and the highest one had was level 51, which was Shoin Yuzuka, who also looked the oldest among the Chunins. Since Ren had already taken the lead, he spoke first. "Excuse us," he began, his tone neutral and direct. "We wanted to ask about your confrontation with the enemy yesterday. Any details you can share would help us prepare." The Chunin exchanged glances, and a blonde-haired girl, Inko Yamanaka, LV43, was the first to respond. "You're the first dispatch team, right?" Ren nodded. "Yes." A black-haired Chunin with a small mark on his left cheek and a Hidden Leaf Village headband tied around his arm, Shoin Yuzuka, LV51, crossed his arms. "It wasn't much of a fight. It lasted less than a minute, and we didn't suffer any injuries. The problem is, we don't know what they were after." Hitoshi adjusted his glasses slightly. "They retreated that fast?" Sho nodded. "Yeah. We spotted them in the middle of the night, but as soon as we engaged, they vanished into the trees. We managed to get a few hits in, but they didn't seem interested in fighting." "They might have just been scouts," Yujao suggested. "That's what we thought too," another Chunin, Koichi Ibarame, LV45, spoke up, his tone calm. "But if that were the case, why risk detection by engaging us in the first place? They could have avoided us entirely and observed from a distance. Instead, they made contact, fought for a few seconds, then disappeared." Ren frowned slightly. "Testing our reaction time?" Sho rubbed his chin in thought. "Maybe. But they didn't fight long enough to gather much information. It's like they wanted us to know they were there." The group fell into brief silence before one of the Chunin from the Hyuga-led squad, Haruto Saratobi, LV-39, spoke up. They left behind a few weapons when they retreated. Nothing special, just standard kunai and shuriken, but all of them were from Hidden Leaf Village. Yu Zhao's eyebrows furrowed. So, they're trying to frame us? Or throw off any investigation into their origins? Koichi adjusted his glasses. That's the most logical conclusion. If we only relied on the weapons they left behind, we might assume they were rogue Hidden Leaf Village shinobi. But based on their movements and tactics, they were definitely not trained in Hidden Leaf Village's style. Ren exhaled, absorbing the information. So, a group of enemy ninja deliberately revealed themselves, engaged for only a moment, left behind Hidden Leaf Village weapons, and then disappeared before they could be properly identified. He glanced around. That sounds more like a distraction than a serious infiltration. Sho nodded. That's what we're thinking too. They wanted to divert our attention to something meaningless while their real objective was elsewhere. The question is what? Hitoshi suddenly spoke up. It could be a multi-step operation. They make contact, plant fake evidence, then observe how Hidden Leaf Village reacts. If they're patient enough, they might be using this to plan a much larger operation in the future. A few of the Chunin nodded at that reasoning. Inko sighed. Great. So now we're stuck trying to figure out if this was just a random scouting attempt or something much bigger. Ren folded his arms, glancing at Yu Zhao and Hitoshi before speaking again. Either way, we'll know soon. If they wanted a reaction, they're going to be watching us. Which means they're still out there somewhere. Sho gave a dog-like smile. That's what we're hoping for. And a woof was heard from his behind where Dog was hanging on his back. Yu Zhao gave an eager grin. Then let's not disappoint them. The conversation ended without any problems, like someone insulting Team 1 for being young. The first dispatch squad has the right to obtain any information necessary from the ninjas involved for most understanding, and the other party could not refuse. Chapter 48, Old people get angry when you question them, so do it. As the teams prepared for the upcoming battle, Jonin Izumo gathered everyone and began explaining the situation. We have confirmation that the enemies we will be facing belong to the Cloud Village, he announced, holding up a piece of paper, likely a report from the village. There are 4 enemy teams, meaning we'll be up against 4 Jonin and 12 Chunin. He paused for a moment before continuing. Jonin Akira, Jonin Utakata, and I will each take on one of the Jonin. The 4th Jonin will be handled by Chunin Sho. The rest of the Chunin will be split among the remaining forces, including Yugain-in. He glanced at Team 1. There were no complaints or concerns. Everyone nodded in understanding. The Chunin would be facing their own rank, while the Gainin of Team 1, all geniuses, would be fighting above their level, a role they had been trained for since their selection. Seeing no objections, Izumo continued, the sensors will first determine the enemy's exact location. If the terrain is favorable, we will go for a direct assault. If not, we will eliminate them one by one before they realize what's happening. The Hyuga Jonin motioned for the sensors to move, and Sho, Koichi and Hitoshi followed him into the forest. As the rest of the squad waited, Utakata approached Ren and Yu Zhao. Neither of you has faced enemy shinobi in direct combat yet, he said, his usual neutral tone softer than usual, but I know your abilities are more than sufficient to deal with Chunin-level opponents. That said, be careful. A shinobi's strength isn't just in their jutsu or physical ability, it's in their mind. Never assume you know what your enemy will do. Both Ren and Yu Zhao nodded. Utakata then turned his attention to Ren. During the battle, keep an eye on Chunin Sho's fight. Step in if necessary. Ren simply nodded in response. He understood why. While Yu Zhao would be facing Chunin opponents like the others, Ren had been asked to monitor Sho's battle because he was capable of handling a Jonin if needed. Unlike normal shinobi, Ren's combat power was far beyond what his displayed level suggested. Most shinobi developed their skills in a balanced manner, meaning their level reflected their overall combat ability with some margin of error. Ren, however, had focused heavily on high-speed combat, making his actual strength at least 10 to 15 levels above his own level 43. The group continued waiting in silence. More than an hour later, the sensor team returned. The Hyuga Jonin spoke first. We've located the enemy. They're hiding in a bunker dug at the base of a mangrove tree. There is only one entrance, and it is covered with seal, so you will have to break through it first. His gaze shifted toward Utakata as he said the last part, indicating that his expertise in Fu-in Jutsu would be needed to break the seal. Utakata nodded without question. Izumo frowned slightly. It looks like we'll have to go with a direct assault then. Our mission is to eliminate them all. At that moment, Haruto Saratobi, one of the Chunin under the Hyuga Jonin, hesitated before speaking. Sir, considering the way they're positioned, doesn't this confirm that they're a suicide team? Their real goal is likely elsewhere. Should we really eliminate them all? Silence followed his question. Izumo turned his gaze toward him, his tone still like it always was. Chun and Haruto, our mission is to eliminate all enemies. Is that understood? Haruto visibly stiffened under the pressure, realizing his mistake. Understood, sir. The Hyuga Jonin said nothing, letting his subordinate face the consequences of his own words. In Hidden Leaf Village, while the military environment was more lenient compared to other villages, questioning an order from a superior especially just before a mission was unacceptable. Hierarchy was crucial, and Haruto would likely face consequences when they returned to the village. Ren also understood the reality of the situation. Team 1's job was only to eliminate the infiltrators. The larger political schemes between Cloud and Hidden Leaf Village were beyond their mission. It wasn't their place to interfere. After a brief moment, Izumo looked at the group one last time and gave the order. Let's go. The Hyuga Jonin took the lead, and the entire squad followed, moving swiftly through the trees toward the enemy's hidden bunker. As the three squads reached the swamp area, they found themselves surrounded by countless mangrove trees, each looking identical to the next. However, the sensors had already pinpointed the enemy's location, and the team moved swiftly toward their target. The Hyuga Jonin raised a hand, signaling the squad to halt. He pointed at one of the trees, which seemed no different from the others. Izumo stepped forward, scanning the terrain carefully. The location does not favor us, he stated. If we enter the bunker, they could collapse it on us, putting us at an extreme disadvantage. However, if we fight outside, we'll have to deal with the increased risk of their lightning-style jutsu. That said, handling the latter is far easier than being buried alive underground, so we'll be engaging them in the open. He turned toward Utakata. What about the seal? Utakata said nothing at first. Instead, he motioned for Ren to come forward. Without hesitation, Ren flickered next to his sensei, standing silently as Utakata gestured toward the tree. What do you see? Utakata asked. Ren focused chakra into his eyes, looking closely at the roots of the tree. A cover fu in jutsu concealed most of the details, but as he concentrated, he was able to see past the initial layer. His eyes narrowed as he analyzed the sealwork. It looks like a basic hiding seal at first, he mumbled, but there are linking symbols connected downward. It's likely designed to alert those inside if someone tries to break in. There are also hidden seals, probably for traps. The linking symbols extend up the tree as well, but I can't determine their function. Though it's either for an explosion or a collapse. Utakata nodded. It leads to an explosion. Your first assessment is correct, the seal alerts them of intrusions and triggers hidden weapon traps. If anyone enters forcefully, the tree will detonate, causing the mud to collapse and bury the bunker. However, the explosion can only be activated by someone with the key. What you're looking at is a fully integrated Fuinjutsu array capable of both automatic and manual control. Ren listened intently as Utakata continued. Watch carefully. I'll dismantle it. Pay attention to each step. Utakata then turned to Izumo and simply stated, 20 seconds. Without another word, he flickered forward. Ren focused entirely on his sensei, adjusting his angle so he could closely observe every movement. He came to know that Utakata was a level 5 Fuinjutsu master some time ago, and this was a rare opportunity to see someone of that caliber in direct action because even though he could learn from him any time, it was rare to see them in work in the field. Utakata extended his hand toward the center of the seal, channeling chakra into it. Ren observed closely as Utakata's chakra passed through dozens of hidden symbols, dismantling the alert and trap functions in an instant. The seal should have reacted violently, yet it remained completely inert. The linking symbols shattered as if they were nothing more than fragile glass. Once the alert system was neutralized, Utakata shifted his chakra toward the tree itself. Suddenly, dozens of hidden seals lit up all over the trunk, glowing faintly even to the naked eye. However, before they could activate, they lost their light and collapsed one by one at a staggering speed. Exactly 20 seconds later, Utakata jumped back. In one swift motion, he threw several explosion tags directly into the now visible bunker. A second later, boom. The swamp shook violently as an immense blast erupted from the underground chamber. Water and mud shot into the air from the sheer force of the explosion. And then shadows burst from the bunker, moving at high speed. Instead of retreating, the enemy shinobi immediately launched themselves toward the Hidden Leaf Village forces, ready to attack. As soon as the enemy shinobi emerged from the bunker, they launched several smoke bombs, instantly reducing visibility and covering the battlefield in a thick haze. However, this had limited effect on Ren thanks to his system. He could still see the levels and names of everyone around him, except for 2 individuals whose levels were displayed as. Despite this, he could still see their names, ensuring that a sneak attack wouldn't catch him off guard. And a sneak attack did come. The 4 strongest enemies with level 58, level 63, and the two shinobi with unidentified level immediately rushed toward the weaker Hidden Leaf Village shinobi. It was clear that they had some prior knowledge of Hidden Leaf Village's squad formations, as they headed straight for the weaker units first. However, Hidden Leaf Village's sensors were unmatched in skill. Even within the smoke, they could track the enemy's movements, allowing the Leaf shinobi to react swiftly. Just as one of the unknown level enemies charged toward Team 1, Utakata flickered in front of Yujao, blocking the attack effortlessly. Taking advantage of this moment, Ren formed a hand seal and released a massive wind-style, great breakthrough. A powerful gust of wind tore through the battlefield, blowing away the smoke and revealing the battlefield clearly. With full visibility restored, the battle began instantly. The Hyuga Jonin immediately engaged one of the level enemies. Izumo Nara dashed toward the level 63 opponent, intercepting him before he could strike any of the Hidden Leaf Village shinobi. This left the level 58 enemy to Shun Yuzuka. Akira pointed at the masked figure and stated, "He will be your opponent." Sho simply nodded, focusing on his target. Meanwhile, the remaining 10 enemy shinobi rushed toward the rest of the Hidden Leaf Village forces. Among them, the strongest had level 51, a shinobi named Masano. Ren immediately set his sights on him and flickered forward, choosing his target without hesitation. As he passed by Hitoshi, he gave a quick message, "Confirm if the two others are dead or in hiding." Hitoshi nodded, already sending out his insects to scout for any hidden threats. The rest of the shinobi chose their opponents instantly. Koichi took on two enemies, one at level 43 and the other at level 36. Haruto also faced two opponents, balancing the battle distribution so that every other Hidden Leaf Village shinobi had one enemy to deal with. With the battlefield fully set, the fight erupted into full-scale combat. Chapter 49, Fight. As soon as the battle was about to begin, Hitoshi's voice rang out clearly, "Dead." His statement confirmed that the two missing enemy shinobi were already eliminated, likely due to Utakata's preemptive explosion tags. One of the enemy shinobi, his opponent, immediately reacted with rage. "You bastard!" he roared, charging toward Hitoshi with a furious expression. The enemy was level 34, 3 levels higher than Hitoshi, an advantage that should have given him confidence. He quickly drew kunai and launched them at Hitoshi, but the young Aburim dodged them effortlessly, his body moving with precise control. Fast. That was the first thing Hitoshi noted. His opponent was a speed-type ninja, circling him at increasing speed, trying to confuse him and find an opening. Suddenly, a fist shot toward Hitoshi's face. But before it could land, Hitoshi leaned back slightly, evading it with minimal movement, and swiftly countered with a sharp kick to the shin. The enemy stumbled backward in pain. Hitoshi tilted his head slightly, his tone calm and unbothered as he muttered, "You're so slow." His opponent gritted his teeth and pushed himself up, clearly frustrated as he reassessed the situation. Meanwhile, Yujao was locked in a deadly clash of steel. Her opponent, level 32, had a tando and was using a close-range, pressure-heavy fighting style, forcing Yujao into an uncomfortable position where she had to parry repeatedly. Every time their blades clashed, the sheer force behind his strikes pushed her backward. She had always hated this kind of situation when an enemy had more physical strength and simply tried to overpower her. The moment she felt herself being pressed down again, she disengaged, flickering to the side just as his tando cut through the thick branch she had been standing on. A close call, however. She didn't waste a second. Lightning chakra surged through her blade as she dashed forward, eyes burning with focus. With a sharp grin, she slashed down with full power, yelling, "Take this, Mount Tai, you bitch." A few meters away, Ren's steps faltered as he heard her scream. "This young lady has a foul mouth." He shook his head, refocusing on his own opponent. Ren didn't waste time assessing the situation further. His opponent, Masano, was level 51 already in the Jonin category. If not for Ren's unnatural combat strength, this fight should have gone to Koichi Aburim instead. But Ren had immediately rushed forward, taking the fight before anyone else could react because only a strong opponent could push him further. Mo watched Ren approach, with a gleam in his eye, as if already seeing how this fight would go. A gain in? Hidden Leaf Village must be desperate. Ren said nothing. Then he flickered. Tma's eyes widened as Ren had disappeared completely from his vision. A powerful gust of wind exploded behind him. Before he could react, a sharp impact struck his ribs. Ren had already appeared at his side, claws extended, aiming for a deep gash, but Tma barely managed to twist his body, minimizing the damage. Blood splattered into the air as Tma leapt backward, gripping his bleeding side. His eyes darkened. Not bad. Ren remained silent, not wanting to waste words with his opponent. A short distance away, Utakata was battling his own opponent. Unlike the others, he wasn't fully focused on the fight, and his enemy noticed. "You shouldn't be distracted when facing someone at your level," his opponent said as lightning crackled around his fingertips and he launched a powerful lightning strike directly at Utakata. Utakata, however, barely moved his body, twisting slightly, allowing the attack to pass right past him. Then, in a flat, unimpressed tone, he replied, "I wouldn't be distracted if you were actually at my level." Hitoshi's opponent rushed forward, his speed enhanced by lightning chakra flowing through his body. Not Raikage's lightning chakra mode, just basic enhancement that everyone can do with training in lightning chakra. He moved like a blur, closing the distance in an instant with a sharp, electrified jab aimed at Hitoshi's chest. But Hitoshi had sparred with Ren too many times to be overwhelmed by pure speed. He pivoted slightly, letting the punch brush past him, then countered with a swift elbow strike to the ribs. The enemy barely blocked it before twisting his body, launching a high-speed spinning kick aimed at Hitoshi's head. Hitoshi ducked under the attack, sliding back as his opponent formed a quick set of hand signs. Lightning style, Thunder Sphere. A bolt of lightning crackled in the enemy's palm, spearing forward at blinding speed. Hitoshi shifted just in time, narrowly dodging as the spear struck a tree behind him, splitting it in half. But he didn't stop moving. With a flick of his wrist, he released a small swarm of insects, sending them toward the enemy. The Cloud Ninja ignored the bugs, focusing solely on Hitoshi, which proved to be a mistake. As the enemy sidestepped the swarm and lunged forward, Hitoshi met him head-on, feinting a punch before twisting and driving a sharp palm strike toward his gut. The enemy blocked it with a grin, gripping Hitoshi's wrist. "Gotcha." But his grin vanished instantly. His body tensed, and his knees buckled slightly. He coughed violently, blood spilling from his lips as he gasped, "Poison." The insects. He barely had time to register the realization before Hitoshi ended it with a precise strike to his throat. The enemy dropped lifelessly to the ground. Hitoshi didn't even look down at the body as he turned away. Yu Zhao's grip tightened around her sword as her opponent lunged at her. He swung down with brute force, aiming to crush her guard, but she angled her blade slightly, letting his attack slide off her sword rather than meeting it head-on. Metal clashed against metal, but Yu Zhao barely felt the impact as she stepped to the side, avoiding the raw power behind his strike. Her opponent clicked his tongue in frustration and attacked again, this time even stronger. His stando cut through the air, coming at her from multiple angles, but Yu Zhao remained calm, her sword flowing like water as she parried each strike with precise, minimal movement. She didn't try to overpower him as she didn't need to. Her opponent was all force with no finesse. Each time he missed, his stance became slightly weaker, his balance more unstable, but he didn't stop. With a growl, he suddenly switched tactics, faking a downward strike before shifting into a wide horizontal slash. Yu Zhao saw through it instantly, stepping back just out of reach. A fraction of a second later, she dashed forward. Her blade flashed with lightning, aiming for his throat. Clang! Her opponent barely managed to block at the last moment. Their weapons locked together. For a moment, they were face to face, eyes locked in a silent battle. Then, in a flash, Yu Zhao disengaged and spun around him, slashing at his side, which he blocked. He countered with a knee to her stomach, but she dodged. She retaliated with a lightning-fast thrust but was parried. The fight continued, but neither was able to land a decisive blow. However, Yu Zhao wasn't satisfied with the stalemate. She needed an opening, but there was none, so she decided she would create one. As her opponent launched another heavy downward slash, Yu Zhao didn't dodge. Instead, she stepped into the attack, raising her left arm to take the hit. A sharp sting tore through her flesh as the tanto sank into her forearm. But her opponent's eyes widened in shock. In that instant, Yu Zhao drove her sword forward, straight into his chest. His body stiffened. His grip on his weapon weakened. Then, he collapsed to his knees, blood dripping from his lips as he looked at her in disbelief. Yu Zhao ripped her blade out with a single fluid motion. Her opponent fell, unmoving. She clutched her bleeding arm, breathing heavily. She glanced at Utakata, her sensei and healer, and thought, "I should wait until he is done." She took out a piece of cloth and wrapped it around her injuries. At that moment, one of the Cloud Jonin noticed her victory and moved to strike. There was a blur of movement, however, a hand blocked his path. Utakata stood in his way, completely unfazed. "It's their first real fight with enemy ninja, and they're doing quite well," Utakata said calmly. The Cloud Jonin grit his teeth, trying to push forward, but Utakata simply held his ground. "But they can't take you on just yet. So for now." His expression didn't change as he tightened his grip. "You're stuck with me." The Cloud Jonin snarled, realizing he had no choice but to continue fighting. Even though Ren had injured him, a Jonin-level opponent would not go down so easily. He ignored the injury and rushed at Ren. The moment Ma rushed forward, Ren moved to meet him. Their fists collided midair as they launched into a fast-paced taijutsu exchange. Ren weaved through the strikes effortlessly, his body moving at odd angles, just barely out of reach of each blow. His opponent's speed was decent, but his attacks were predictable. Ren countered with quick jabs, aiming at pressure points, But Ma ignored the attacks with sheer endurance and retaliated with much harsher and stronger strikes. Then there was a glint of steel and Ma suddenly swiped at Ren with a hidden kunai. Ren tilted his head back just enough for the blade to miss his throat by a hair's breadth. Ma gritted his teeth and swung again, this time aiming for Ren's ribs. Ren twisted his torso unnaturally, the blade passing through empty space once more. Ma made a third strike, but Ren bent his entire body backward, balancing on one foot as the kunai sliced through the air above him. Ma's eyes widened in frustration. TCH. Slippery little. Instead of finishing his sentence, he suddenly leapt backward, putting distance between them. Then in a quick succession he made hand signs and yelled. Fire style, great fireball jutsu. A massive wave of fire erupted from Ma's mouth at point-blank range, the heat distorting the air between them. Ren had no room to dodge. The fireball surged forward, engulfing his vision completely. Ma smirked, confident in his attack. But at the last moment Ren made his move. Chapter 50, Wind weaker than fire? Nah, that's skill issue. Ren's hands blurred through a single hand sign. Wind style, violent whirlwind. A howling vortex of wind erupted from Ren's mouth, colliding directly with the incoming fireball. For a brief moment, the two jutsus clashed. Then the fireball expanded. Fueled by Ren's wind, the flames doubled in size, but instead of consuming him, the whirlwind altered its course, launching the raging inferno straight back at Ma. His eyes widened in horror. With a desperate leap, Ma barely escaped, but not before scorching flames licked at his arms and legs, leaving blackened burns on his body. The fireball, now unleashed, shot towards the swamp and slammed into the water with a deafening explosion. A massive blast of steam erupted into the air, momentarily obscuring the battlefield. When the haze cleared, the area where the fireball had landed was now completely dry, the swamp water evaporated into nothing. Ren exhaled slowly, his chakra slightly drained. The violent whirlwind jutsu was one of his most chakra-intensive techniques, costing him a solid 400 CP. Across from him, Ma was struggling to catch his breath. His body was covered in scorch marks, his movements sluggish from both exhaustion and pain. He stared at Ren, his previous confidence replaced by desperation. Then, without warning, he turned and ran. Some of his surviving comrades shouted curses at him, but Ma ignored them. He bolted toward the trees, trying to escape. Ren didn't hesitate. He flickered forward, closing the gap in seconds. Ma, realizing there was no way he could outrun Ren, suddenly whirled around and threw up his hands. Stop! He shouted. I'll tell you everything about the mission. His voice was loud enough for most of the battlefield to hear. For a split second, Ren hesitated. His eyes flickered toward Utakata. His sensei met his gaze, his face unreadable. Then he gave a simple, sharp gesture to finish him. Ren turned back to Ma and didn't stop. Ma cursed, trying to widen the distance between them again, but Ren was faster. In a blink, he flickered right in front of him. With no other choice but to fight, the wounded cloud ninja gritted his teeth and formed hand signs at blinding speed. Fire style, Phoenix Fire Barrage. Small fireballs erupted from his mouth, twisting unpredictably through the air toward Ren. But Ren was already moving. With a single sweep of his hands, several blades of slicing wind erupted from his claws, intercepting the fireballs. Each burst of flame was devoured by the wind, causing small explosions midair, illuminating Ren's small figure. Ma didn't hesitate, already weaving his next jutsu. Lightning style, Thunderclap. A sudden flash of electricity surged through the air, arcing towards Ren with violent intensity. But Ren thrust both palms forward, Wind style, Air Wall, unleashing a torrential blast of wind that scattered the incoming lightning harmlessly into the sky. Ma stumbled backward, panting heavily. His chakra was running low. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to prepare one last attack, but his movements had slowed. Ren noticed. The opening he was waiting for was finally there. Ma suddenly lunged forward, kunai in hand, aiming straight for Ren's throat. But before the attack could even be completed, Ma's body froze. Squelch. His eyes trembled, staring down at the bloodied claws protruding from his chest. Ren's hand had already pierced through his heart. A gurgled breath escaped Ma's lips. His kunai slipped from his fingers, clattering to the ground. Ren didn't say a word. He simply twisted his hands lightly, ensuring the kill was clean. Ma shuddered one last time, then went still. With a sharp pull, Ren retracted his claws, letting Ma's lifeless body slump to the ground. It was over. With his own fight finished, Ren glanced toward Sho, whom Utakata had instructed him to watch over. However, due to his own battle, he hadn't been able to keep an eye on him. Now that he looked, Sho was badly injured. Utakata, meanwhile, was engaging with both Sho's opponent and his own at the same time. Despite facing two Jonin-level opponents, Utakata was handling them with surprising ease. As he fought, he glanced at Ren and, Seeing that Ren had already finished his battle, he finally made his move. In an instant, Yukata killed the weaker opponent. The remaining enemy barely had time to react before he was hit directly by a water bullet. Unable to dodge, the enemy took the attack head-on. However, before he could recover, Yukata followed up with a precise volley of shuriken. The man failed to defend and fell, lifeless. With 2 more enemies down, Ren surveyed the battlefield. Most of their side was winning. Naruto, who had been fighting 2 enemies, was injured but still standing. He had just finished off one opponent, while Hitoshi was helping him deal with the second. Koichi, who also took on 2 opponents, had already finished his battle and was now assisting Aoi Mitakata, whose stomach had been pierced. She was lying on the ground, bleeding, but still alive. At this point, only the 2 remaining Cloud Jonin were still fighting. Seeing that most of the battles were settled, Ren made his way to Yujao. She was still clutching her injured arm, waiting near the battlefield. "Let's go to Sensei. He'll heal you," Ren said. Yujao nodded. I was waiting for him to finish. The 2 of them flickered to Yukata, who was standing on a tree, observing the last 2 fights. Yujao spoke up first. "Sensei, can you heal me now, or should I wait?" Since her injuries weren't severe, and this was her first real battle wound, she figured it was a good question to ask. Yukata glanced at her arm, removed the makeshift cloth wrap, and placed his hand over the wound. A soft green glow spread from his palm as he explained, "When you're injured in the field, if your wounds aren't severe, you should wait until the mission is complete before seeking treatment. However, it ultimately depends on the healer's judgment. If the healer believes your injury can wait, then they won't waste their chakra." He pointed toward Aoi, Naruto, and Sho. "For example, their injuries look serious, but I can heal them without issue. However, I chose to wait until the Jonin battle was finished, in case there were any surprises." He continued healing, his eyes never leaving the ongoing battle. "Of course, it also depends on the situation. If you're on a prolonged mission, or if there's an immediate risk, a healer might prioritize saving chakra for emergencies. You'll learn these things as you gain more experience." As he finished speaking, Yujao's wound was already closed. At that same moment, Izumo had also killed his opponent. Yukata glanced at Ren and asked, "Any injuries?" Ren shook his head. "No." Before anyone could say more, Akira's opponent, realizing he was the only one left, suddenly tried to make a desperate move. He quickly moved closer to where everyone was gathered and began forming several hand seals. However, before he could complete them, he was suddenly launched backward at high speed. The force of the blow sent him flying through the trees before a loud explosion erupted in the distance. Ren turned his head and saw Yukata standing where the enemy had been just seconds ago. Yukata spoke calmly as he turned to his students. "This is an example of a crafty shinobi. If he had gotten close enough, he could have taken all of you down in a suicide blast before you had a chance to react." His cold gaze then turned toward Akira. "This will go in the report," Yukata said flatly, then asked, "Is he dead?" Akira's face twisted with bitterness. As a Hyuga, he should have noticed the enemy's intentions much sooner. Allowing a suicide bomber to get that close to his own allies was a clear failure in judgment. He looked toward the smoking remains of the Cloud Ninja and nodded stiffly. "Dead." Yukata said nothing further. Instead, he walked toward the injured leaf shinobi, Aoi, Naruto, and Sho, and placed them all together. One by one, he healed them completely. It took about 5 minutes per person, but by the time he was finished, they were all back in top condition. Izumo, now in charge again, gave his final order. "Collect the bodies." Those who weren't injured moved out to gather the enemy corpses. They also found 2 more bodies inside the bunker. The bunker itself was completely empty. Nothing but a plain room, likely used for waiting. When all the bodies were collected, Izumo stood before the assembled shinobi. "Let's return to camp," he ordered. "Our mission is complete." All the leaf shinobi returned to their makeshift campsite and retreated to their tents. The operation had begun near afternoon, shortly after Team 1 had arrived and taken a brief rest. Between scouting, planning, and executing the attack, hours had passed. Now, as they settled down, the sun was beginning to set. Inside Team 1's tent, Yukata faced his students and gave a simple instruction. "Complete your mission reports up to this point. I'll rest until it's time for you to sleep." The 3 Genin nodded and immediately began writing. For dinner, everyone had jerky or a ration pill, the staple food for shinobi on missions. It wasn't much, but it was efficient and kept them ready for battle. Once they finished, Yukata addressed his team again. "I'll keep watch on behalf of our team tonight. You can rest. However, this is only for this mission. From the next time onward, you will complete your duties like any normal shinobi. We will leave for the village at first light." With that, he flickered out of the tent. Left alone, The three Genin settled into a half-awake state. Even though a brief rest was enough for a shinobi, sleep was still important, especially for growing children. Outside the tent, Utakata moved away from the camp and created a shadow clone. The clone remained behind, while the real Utakata flickered through the dense forest. Moving swiftly, he reached the coastline near the sea. As he was about to land, two masked figures emerged from the shadows. Anbu agents. However, the moment Utakata flared his chakra slightly, the Anbu agents instantly recognized him and moved aside. Utakata continued until he reached the shore, where a man with a mane of wild white hair was seated on a rock, staring out at the waves. Sensing someone approach, the man turned, his face lighting up with joy. Utakata. What brings you here? Utakata inclined his head slightly and responded in a calm voice. Sensei. Chapter 51, Age or Assets. Jiraiya let out a jovial laugh and patted the ground beside him. Sit, sit. This toad sage doesn't get to see his old students often these days. Utakata walked over and sat down beside the man now identified as the toad sage. In the entire ninja world, no one except Jiraiya the Gallant can call himself the toad sage. Did the old man send you here? Jiraiya asked. Utakata shook his head. No. I became a Jonin sensei. My team is the first dispatch squad, so we were part of the unit handling the infiltrators. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Oh? So you finally became an instructor. However, after a moment, he frowned slightly. But wait, if I remember correctly, it's only been a month or two since the teams were formed. So how come you're already taking them on A-rank missions? Utakata didn't answer right away. He simply stared at the sea, watching the waves crash against the shore. I wouldn't have brought them here if I didn't think they were ready, he finally said. Then, after a brief pause, he continued, besides, I have Juichi's kid on my team. And I believe he has talent on Minato's level. A once-in-a-generation talent. The three on my team can handle this mission without any great problem, so I agreed. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed slightly as he turned to look at Utakata. It's unlike you to give someone such high praise, he mused. Then, after a moment of thought, he muttered, Juichi's kid. And Minato, huh? His lips curled into a small smirk as he asked, and what about his father? Utakata scoffed. He's got it the easiest out of all of us. He just sits with Shikaku every day, complains about any new idea, and brags about his kid. Jiraiya let out a loud laugh. Did you really think Juichi would just sit at a desk and do his job properly? Utakata sighed, shaking his head. After a moment of silence, Jiraiya turned to him again. So how are you handling dealing with kids? Remind you of your time as a Genin? Utakata's response was immediate. My situation is much better than yours, at least. I don't have a Minato who was too good of a human when we were under you, nor do I have a Juichi who was too loud. The ones I have are all the quiet types, and one of them is an Abarame, so we can actually work in silence. At this, Jiraiya's face darkened. He grimaced as old memories resurfaced. The chaos of training a young Minato and Juichi, two polar opposites, was not something he recalled fondly. The two continued to talk, sharing stories and reflections, until the first light of dawn began breaking over the horizon. Utakata suddenly asked, eyes still fixed on the distant sea, you're not going to join the battle? Jiraiya shook his head. Only if they send a Jinchuriki. He then hesitated for a moment before asking, how is Naruto? Utakata's expression darkened slightly. I don't know, he admitted, voice quieter than before. I tried many times, but I couldn't bring myself to see him. Even from a distance. Jiraiya sighed heavily. I want to tell you it's not your fault, but I already know you wouldn't believe it. Utakata said nothing. Instead, he stood up and turned to leave, but then he suddenly paused. Sensei, he said, his voice weird. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Utakata hesitated for a moment before finally asking, how did you deal with us? Jiraiya blinked. Utakata continued, his expression unreadable. How did you handle a team where one person was too good? And the others weren't? Jiraiya opened his mouth, ready to dismiss the question with a joke, but sensei. Utakata's voice held a rare intensity. For the first time in their conversation, Jiraiya saw a hint of conflict in his usually rational student's eyes. Jiraiya sighed again, rubbing the back of his head. You're going to make me grow old faster than the third with all these deep questions, he muttered. Then, after a brief silence, he looked up at the sky and finally answered. You can't limit them. Just let him run wild. Let him do whatever he wants to. Your only job is to be there for him if he ever needs you. I think Juichi already knows it. As for the others, Jiraiya chuckled lightly. I think you'll do a better job than I did. Utakata stood there for a moment, taking in his sensei's words. Then, finally, he nodded. Without another word, he flickered away, disappearing into the forest. Now alone once again, Jiraiya let out a quiet sigh, watching the sunrise over the ocean. "I don't think I did a good job handling the situation back then," he muttered under his breath. "So I hope you will." By the time the sun began to rise, the Leaf teams had already cleaned up their campsite and were preparing to depart. Each team had a different destination. Team 1 was heading back to the village, while Team Akira was assigned to another mission, one that Ren wasn't privy to. Meanwhile, the border patrol team would continue their ongoing mission, maintaining security along this part of the eastern perimeter. As part of their responsibilities, Team 1 would submit their own mission reports, while Utakata would personally brief the Hokage and hand over the enemy bodies for further investigation. There was always the chance that the village could extract useful intelligence from them. Once the teams exchanged brief farewells, they parted ways, each moving in their respective directions. Team 1 traveled through the dense forest, making their way back toward Hidden Leaf Village. Unlike their hurried journey before, this time their pace was much slower since there was no longer a need to rush. As Team 1 traveled through the dense forest, Utakata spoke, "At our current pace, it will take us 3 days to reach the village. By the night of the second day, we should reach Otafukige town, where we'll rest before continuing our journey the next morning." The Gainans nodded in understanding and continued in silence. By the time they reached Otafukige, the sun had already set for the second day, casting a warm glow over the bustling town. Even though the town was also a civilian-only town like the civilian village they had visited on their first mission, Otafukige was significantly larger, with well-lit streets and numerous establishments catering to travelers and merchants. As Hidden Leaf Village shinobi, Team 1 had no difficulty entering the town, moving freely under the authority granted to them within the Land of Fire. The town was a common stop for those traveling toward the Hidden Leaf Village, making it a natural resting point for weary travelers. After a quick assessment, they chose a moderate-priced inn and booked 3 rooms, one for Ren and Hitoshi, one for Yujao, and one for Utakata. While sleeping arrangements were flexible during missions, traditional values still dictated that boys and girls should maintain separate rooms whenever possible. The shinobi world held many contradictory social norms, balancing pragmatism on the battlefield with cultural traditions in civilian life. After checking in, Ren entered his room and changed into a fresh set of clothes, his usual sleeveless denim shirt and blue cargo pants. He had 7 identical sets, preferring convenience over variety. Like most people in the ninja world, he had learned early on that practicality always outweighed fashion. He had briefly considered changing his attire after becoming a genin but had quickly abandoned the idea when he imagined the tedium of choosing new outfits from countless options. After removing his forehead protector and storing it in his storage belt, Ren decided to explore the town. He asked his roommate Hitoshi, but his teammate declined the offer, likely preferring to rest. When he tried Yujao's room, she didn't even answer. With no other option, Ren ventured out alone, blending into the lively streets. Otafukige was bustling but ordinary. Despite the lively atmosphere, Ren quickly grew bored, realizing that being a shinobi among civilians made everything feel underwhelming. That was when his eyes landed on a large gambling house, one of the most decorated establishments in town. Bright lanterns and extravagant banners adorned the entrance, inviting thrill-seekers inside. Hidden Leaf Village had its own gambling dens, but they strictly enforced a height requirement, which Ren unfortunately did not meet. AG had once tried to sneak into one using the transformation jutsu, but he was caught by a security seal at the entrance that instantly dispelled the jutsu. If a kid got caught, they would either be kicked out or dragged to their parents or teacher, depending on the mood of the staff. Ren found it ridiculous that children could be trained killers, yet they weren't allowed to gamble or drink. This world is so strange, he thought. No wonder Itachi killed his entire clan, they must have discouraged him from gambling and drinking even after he reached the required height. Shaking his head as he praised his own dark humor, Ren slipped into a nearby alleyway and activated the transformation jutsu. Instead of changing into a different person, he simply increased his height and gave himself a more mature look, which was enough to pass as an adult without attracting attention. Straightening his posture, he confidently walked toward the den. As he approached, he saw the familiar height measuring pole at the entrance. With his new form, he easily passed the requirement and entered the gambling house without issue. Unlike Hidden Leaf Village, this place had no security seals to dispel his transformation, so there was nothing stopping him from trying his luck. Inside the gambling den, the atmosphere was lively, filled with the clinking of chips, the rolling of dice, and the cheers and groans of gamblers testing their luck. Several tables were set up, each surrounded by eager onlookers. There were games like blackjack, craps, Tsunoda's favorite dice game, and various card games. Ren walked over to the exchange counter, noting a sign that stated the maximum exchange limit was 10,000 ryo. Without hesitation, he exchanged the full amount, handing over his money in exchange for a stack of colorful chips. The cashier, a man with a sly smile, eagerly processed the exchange, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He had seen many newcomers like Ren, and most ended up losing everything within minutes. Feigning regret, he sighed, such a shame our boss set the limit at 10,000 ryo. But I hope you enjoy your time here. Ren barely acknowledged the man's words, instead scanning the room. He had hoped to spot Tsunade, but luck wasn't on his side tonight. The legendary gambler was nowhere to be found. If this was a fanfic, Ren would have definitely met the Sannin here, and then she would discover Ren in disguise, and when she lost to him eventually she would blackmail him about exposing him instead of paying money. But then she would be surprised by his talent and take him as her student. Later on the two would fall in love, not minding the enormous age gap, only focusing on the other enormous thing. But alas, this was reality. Something like that won't happen here. With his chips in hand, he made his way to the dice tables. Half an hour later, Ren walked out of the casino 40,000 ryo richer, carrying a total of 50,000 ryo in his pockets. As he had expected, the cashier's expression was priceless when Ren returned to exchange his chips for cash. The man had repeatedly tried to convince him to keep playing, insisting that beginner's luck lasts even longer and that he should try for an even bigger win. But Ren wasn't greedy. Taking too much from harmless civilians would weigh on his conscience. However, since the cashier had been so eager to give him the money of his boss, Ren decided he would definitely visit this casino again whenever he passed through the town. Feeling satisfied and even more wealthier, he returned to the inn and got some rest. At 8 a.m., Team 1 departed from the inn, having eaten a quick breakfast before heading out. The journey back to Hidden Leaf Village was expected to be uneventful, but just as they had traveled a short distance from the town, a sudden cry of an eagle pierced through the air. The distinct call was a distress signal, a coded message used exclusively by Hidden Leaf Village shinobi to signal an emergency situation. Uekata immediately turned in the direction of the sound, his expression sharpening. Without hesitation, he gave a single order, "Let's go." And just like that, Team 1 flickered into the trees, moving swiftly toward the source of the distress call. Chapter 52, The Man with Many Names. A short distance away, the normally deserted pathway was in complete ruin. Scattered debris from what once appeared to be a lavish caravan littered the ground, while several merchant bodies lay motionless, their conditions unknown. The scene was chaotic, with shattered wooden planks, torn fabrics, and supplies strewn across the dirt road. One figure, however, stood out from the rest. A man clad in Hidden Leaf Village's standard Jonin uniform lay motionless, his leaf headband still securely fastened to his forehead. A short distance away, a kunoichi much younger than the man was also unconscious, her leaf headband marking her as a Hidden Leaf Village ninja. Nearby, a man dressed in elaborate royal robes was shielded by 12 armed guards, standing protectively around him. Their tense stances and alert eyes made it clear they were preparing for the worst. A few meters ahead, two young shinobi stood facing a single opponent. A man with flowing black hair and a strange, swirly patterned mask concealing his face. In his hand, he held long sword. One of the young shinobi, a boy with spiky black hair and onyx eyes, stood frozen in place, his body completely stiff. His companion clicked his tongue in irritation before rushing forward, aiming to strike the masked enemy head-on. However, before he could even get close, the masked man moved first. His blade was already inches from the boy's throat, traveling so fast that death seemed inevitable until, at the last moment, the boy was yanked backward with intense force, narrowly evading a fatal strike. The one responsible for pulling him back, a boy with deep blue eyes and short blue hair, landed beside him in a blur and the two jumped back. The masked man's empty gaze shifted toward the new arrivals. Standing near the black-haired boy were now three more figures. Team 1 had arrived on the scene. As soon as Team 1 arrived, the man in royal robes let out a relieved voice, his tone filled with desperation. "Uekata. Thank the sage you are here. This man is responsible for attacking me, the daimyo of the Fire Nation. I order you, kill him at once." However, Uekata didn't even spare the daimyo a glance. His gaze remained locked onto the masked man standing before them. Without shifting his eyes away, he muttered in a low voice to his students, his tone grim. "Be ready to run at any moment. This man is not someone you can handle. He's the one responsible for the attack 2 years ago and the one who is responsible for killing the 4th Hokage." The weight of those words slammed into Team 1 like a hammer. The 4th Hokage. The mere mention of him sent a chill down their spines. The position of Hokage was reserved for the strongest shinobi, and among them, the 4th was special. He had been young yet unmatched, a prodigy who could have become the strongest ninja in history if given the time to grow even further. Yet, the man standing before them was the one responsible for his death. Ren felt his breath hitch. He knew who this was. The man who deceived an entire world while wearing a mask. The false Madara. The one who started the greatest war in shinobi history over a girl he loved. The second sage of six paths. Obito Uchiha. For a brief moment, Ren's eyes flicked to the brown-haired boy standing frozen in his hands, whose gaze was blank and unfocused. His mind likely unable to process what had just happened. He was almost dead. He then glanced at Itachi, who was still frozen, and remembered this scene. This was that moment. The canon event where Itachi awakened his Sharingan, but now, with Team 1's unexpected intervention, things had shifted. Ren felt a strange sense of unease but at the same time rewards. A fleeting thought flashed through his mind. But before he could dwell on it, another, more urgent realization crashed over him like a wave. I need to survive first. Obito and Utakata remained locked in a tense stare-down. Then, Obito finally spoke. His voice was low and hoarse, a voice that didn't match his stature. You were lucky last time. But this time, I will finish the job. And then he vanished. A swirling distortion in space, and just like that he was gone. Ren's body tensed instantly, his instincts screaming as he prepared for an attack from any direction, and then there was a loud impact. A thud, followed by a shockwave, as Utakata collided with Obito midair. Their battle had begun. Utakata's first strike was immediate, a brutal punch aimed at Obito's face. But it phased right through him. Utakata didn't hesitate. He shifted his stance, launching a series of rapid attacks, punches, kicks, even a kunai slash. Every single attack slipped through Obito like he was a ghost. Ren had landed near his teammates, watching intently. He knew how to deal with Obito, but how could he possibly explain that to Utakata? If he exposed too much knowledge, his biggest problem wouldn't be Obito. It would be the T&I department in Hidden Leaf Village. Obito remained untouched, phasing through Utakata's attacks with almost bored indifference. Then, without warning, he gave a single punch and it connected. Utakata was sent skidding back, dust and debris flying in his wake, and then Obito turned his attention to Team 1. He appeared behind them in an instant, his sword slicing through the air, aimed directly at the three young shinobi. Ren's instincts screamed. Without thinking, he ducked, his body moving before his mind even registered the attack. In the same motion, he shoved both Yujao and Hitoshi's heads down with him, forcing them to avoid the deadly strike. The sword whistled through empty air. No blood spilled. Obito's masked gaze flickered slightly. Good instincts. Before he could press the attack, Utakata rushed in, passing through Obito's body once again. Ren barely had time to process what was happening when Obito raised his sword once again. There was a flash of silver. The sword was coming down. Straight for him. Time slowed. Ren could see every intricate detail of the blade, the tiny scratches, the angle of its descent, the way the light reflected off its polished edge. He could see the attack, every single detail of it, so he moved, trying to dodge, but he wasn't fast enough. A sharp, burning pain exploded through his left arm. He barely had time to process the agony before his body reacted instinctively. His claws lashed out, striking at Obito's stomach only to pass through. At the same moment, Obito's blade passed through Ren's arm. It should have severed his limb entirely, but at the last possible second, the sword which was about to cut through his arm phased through it, sparing it from being severed. Ren's vision blurred for a moment, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. Then he flickered away. The moment his feet touched solid ground, his legs gave out. He collapsed onto his knees, panting hard, his entire body trembling. His left arm hung uselessly at his side, blood seeping between his fingers as he clutched it tightly, trying to stem the bleeding. His eyes flicked up as Obito stood exactly where he was, staring at Ren with an unreadable expression. For the second time since arriving in this world, Ren felt true fear. Even though he knew how to deal with him and could see the attack coming, he wasn't fast enough to dodge it completely. His body had moved at just the last moment, so he avoided instant death. However, if he hadn't attacked just at the right time, his arm would have been severed, and only when he and father stood together could they make a complete person. The first to react was Utakata. In an instant, he appeared beside Ren, placing a firm hand on his injured arm. A faint green glow spread from his palm as he began healing the wound. Obito's masked gaze flickered between his sword and Ren, his voice slow and deliberate. You remind me of someone. Ren took deep, measured breaths, his heart still hammering against his chest. As Utakata's healing chakra worked through his arm, he murmured, he was about to sever my arm, but something happened. His blade didn't cut through, it passed through instead. It was a calculated move. Earlier, if he had pointed out Obito's ability too quickly, it would have been suspicious. But now, after experiencing a near-fatal blow firsthand and observing Obito up close, it made sense for him to piece some things together. Utakata narrowed his eyes, considering Ren's words as he continued healing. What happened? He thought. Everything had transpired too fast, even for him. One moment, Obito's sword was about to sever Ren's arm, and the next instant it had passed through instead. Damn it. I can't track him properly. If we want to deal with him, we first have to figure out how to hit him. Utakata's grip on Ren's arm tightened slightly. Work with me. He gave a final pulse of chakra, sealing the wound completely, before rising to his feet. Then, his voice rang out sharply. Gain in, protect the daimyo. The four young shinobi who had been standing in stunned silence finally snapped back to reality. Yujao's breath hitched, her voice barely above a whisper. Ren. Her hands trembled slightly at the memory of how close he had been to losing an arm or worse. But Utakata's command came again, louder and firmer. Now. Without hesitation, all four Genin moved instantly, positioning themselves near the daimyo and his guards. Though Utakata had framed it as protecting the daimyo, in truth, his real intent was to provide the Genin with a safety buffer by placing them under the Guardian's protection, a little distance from the battlefield. The 12 Guardians understood this as well, but now wasn't the time to argue. They remained alert, standing between the Genin and the battle ahead. Meanwhile, Obito let out a mocking chuckle, his voice dripping with amusement. Ah, Hidden Leaf Village ninjas. Always the epitome of love and sacrifice. Utakata didn't respond. He simply moved. With blinding speed, he launched himself at Obito once again, his attacks relentless, punches, kicks, kunai slashes, anything that could land a blow. But nothing connected. Obito remained untouched, his body flickering like a ghost as every attack passed through him effortlessly. You know you can't do anything but this time, Ren interrupted him. From the side, wind blades tore through the air, slicing directly toward Obito in quick succession. 1, 2, 3. But just like Utakata's attacks, they passed through him. Ren gritted his teeth, but he didn't stop. Instead, he and Utakata coordinated their attacks, taijutsu and ninjutsu working in tandem. Still, nothing landed. Ren quickly retrieved several explosive tags, launching them at point-blank range, directly at Obito's masked face. A series of deafening explosions rocked the battlefield. Flames and dust surged into the air. But when the smoke cleared, Obito stood unharmed. He hadn't even flinched. How rude, Obito muttered. Damn it. Utakata clenched his fists. No matter what we do, he quickly formed hand seals, his chakra surging. Water style, water bullet jutsu, a massive sphere of water shot toward Obito, rushing forward with the force of a raging tide. But Obito's Mangekyo Sharingan spun. In the blink of an eye, the entire attack was sucked into a swirling vortex, disappearing into another dimension. Ren barely had time to process it before Obito reappeared above Utakata. His sword already descending. Ren's body and mind worked in tandem. Just as he thought of what to do, his body moved. At the exact moment Obito's blade was about to strike Utakata, Ren's own attack landed, passing through Obito's body just as Obito's strike passed through Utakata's. Just like before. Both Utakata and Ren distanced themselves, once again resuming their volley of useless attacks. But this time Ren was watching, waiting for the right moment to tell Utakata. Just at that moment Obito attacked Ren, but this time Utakata interfered just before the strike hit Ren, and it happened just like before, and both Ren and Obito were unharmed. This is it, he thought, and then shouted, Sensei. Utakata's response came without hesitation. He had also figured it out. Yes. I got it. But at that exact moment, Obito's voice rang out too. Gotcha. Ren stared at the scene in front of him. In a sickening instant, Obito's hand was wrapped around Utakata's wrist. A dark swirl of space began forming. Utakata was about to be sucked in Obito's dimension. Chapter 53, Hidden Leaf Village Nians are hypocrite. Just as Utakata was about to be completely devoured by the swirling vortex, Ren sprang into action. With his claws sharpened by razor-like wind chakra, he lunged at Obito from the side. His claws stabbed into Obito's torso, and this time they made actual contact. Ren felt his claws pierce through flesh, and his heart leaped. He had almost reached Obito's heart when suddenly Obito's body turned intangible once again, and Ren's claws passed through harmlessly. But the good news was that Utakata was now free, the vortex pulling him into the dimension had stopped, and he quickly broke out of Obito's grasp. It worked. Ren didn't hesitate, he immediately distanced himself from Obito, knowing that even though he managed to injure him, he wouldn't survive if Obito retaliated right now. Ren's heart pounded in his chest as he recalled the gamble he'd just taken. He had a vague memory from his previous life that Obito couldn't simultaneously become intangible and use Kamyu to absorb someone. It had been a risky move, but it paid off. Obito can only use Kamyu's ability for one purpose at a time, either becoming intangible or absorbing someone into his dimension, at least for now. Utakata, still a bit disoriented, quickly regained his footing and thought about what he had just felt. There was something familiar about it, like the feeling he got when his teammate used his most potent jutsu. But he couldn't dwell on it, as Obito's cold, Menacing voice rang out. I was right. You really remind me of him, the greatest hypocrite in all of Hidden Leaf Village. Obito's eyes seemed to narrow behind the mask as his voice dropped even lower. But what can you do? Even if you attacked me once, can you do it again? No. You only had one chance, and that was because I was playing with you. But now I will show you. I will show you what you Hidden Leaf Village shinobi fear the most. With that, he vanished in a swirl, his presence disappearing completely. Ren's entire body tensed as a chill ran down his spine. No. He's going after his instincts proved correct. Obito reappeared directly behind the Gainin, his sword raised high, ready to strike down Itachi. His words were merciless as he swung the blade down. You can't do anything. Itachi remained frozen, his mind struggling to catch up, when suddenly his teammate, the one who had nearly died earlier, pushed him aside, taking the full brunt of the sword strike. Blood splattered across the ground as the boy's body collapsed, lifeless before he could even utter a word. Itachi's world seemed to stop. He stared at his fallen teammate, the one with whom he had shared civil missions. Even if the other party didn't always get along with him, they had formed a bond. But now he was dead. Itachi's black eyes quivered, and then they shifted. Slowly, two comma-shaped tomui emerged, spinning around his irises as they turned a brilliant crimson. Itachi Uchiha had undergone the awakening of his Sharingan. Obito paused, his own eyes narrowing as he stared at the transformation. Looks like you have the Uchiha blood flowing in you, he muttered, almost amused. It was as if the previous fury he had displayed was nothing more than an act. The battlefield fell into an eerie silence as everyone processed what had just happened. Obito turned his gaze back to Itachi and spoke with an air of self-centeredness. I, Madara Uchiha, will be watching you, young Uchiha. And with that, he swirled out of existence, vanishing just as abruptly as he had appeared. The tension lingered for a moment, as if everyone was bracing for another attack. Ren remained alert, his body poised to move, but after a full 2 minutes without any sign of Obito, he finally allowed himself to relax. His body slumped down in exhaustion, the adrenaline finally ebbing away. The realization of what had just happened settled over him, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the chaos that had just unfolded. Seeing that everything had finally settled down, Yujao and Hitoshi ran over to Ren, who was now sitting with his back against a tree, his breathing still a bit ragged from exhaustion. Yujao, her eyes glassy with unshed tears, immediately knelt beside him, her voice trembling. Are you okay? She asked, her hands gently but frantically checking Ren's body for any signs of injury. Ren managed a tired nod, giving her a faint smile. Yeah. No injuries. Just tired. Very tired. He really was exhausted. Even though he hadn't used much chakra during the fight, both his brain and body had been working at full capacity. One moment of relaxation could have meant a sword slicing through his body or Yukata's. Yujao seemed relieved but still sat down by his side, while Hitoshi plopped down in front of him, his face still a bit pale from how close he too had been to losing his life from the masked man's first attack. A short distance away, Yukata was talking to the daimyo, while one of his clones was checking on the injured Jonin. The tense atmosphere had softened, but the aftermath of the fight still lingered. Yujao's gaze shifted to the body of Itachi's dead teammate, her expression growing somber. I was really scared, she admitted softly. Ren gave her a sideways glance, thinking to himself. What? Why were you scared? I was the one fighting the man who is responsible for killing a freaking Hokage. I should be scared. But then it hit him, oh right, we're teammates. She must have been scared for me. His train of thought was cut off when Yujao continued, her voice almost hushed. I kept thinking, what would I do if that sword came at me? I wouldn't be able to take even one hit. Ren turned his head to her mechanically, processing her words. You were scared that a sword would come at you, while the guy had all his anger focused on me because I reminded him of someone? Yujao pouted defensively, crossing her arms. Hey, I had to think of the worst-case scenario. She shot back, trying to keep her tone light. Ren just stared at her, realizing she was trying to lighten the mood with her weird way of comforting him. What kind of comforting technique is this? Shifting anger? Playing the victim card? I don't understand. I don't even need comfort, I just need sleep. Realizing that Yukata was still busy with the daimyo, Ren sighed and leaned back against the tree. I'll just sleep for a while. Wake me up when we're ready to go. He let his eyes close, feeling the weight of fatigue finally pulling him under. In the comforting silence, even the tension from the battle seemed to melt away for a moment. At the same time, Yukata was speaking with the daimyo. He gave a light bow, his tone neutral and respectful. Forgive me for not greeting you earlier, daimyo-sama, but I hope you understand that the situation was not suitable, Yukata said calmly. The fire daimyo, now sitting on a chair, waved his hand dismissively. Don't worry about it. But why did you let that man escape? You should have finished him off when you had the chance. And was he really Madara? The daimyo's voice turned fearful at the last part. Utakata's face grew serious as he replied, that is the problem, daimyo-sama. I did not have the chance to finish him, and the claim of him being Madara does not make sense either. But rest assured, I will ensure that you receive a complete report once I have returned to the village. The fire daimyo nodded thoughtfully. Do as you see fit. I'll make sure you receive a reward for saving my life once we reach the capital. Escort us there. Utakata shook his head slightly. I apologize, but I'm afraid that won't be possible, daimyo-sama. It has been ordered that any sighting of that man must be reported at the earliest notice. However, do not worry, the Anbu is here. They will ensure your safe passage. As Utakata finished speaking, a man wearing a bear mask appeared by his side, and several other shinobi dressed in similar Anbu attire materialized on the surrounding trees. Bear here will be responsible for escorting you safely to the fire capital. However, it would be wise for the caravan not to make any stops along the way. The fire daimyo nodded, clearly shaken but compliant. I shall trust your judgment, then. He was surprisingly agreeable, likely because he had previously insisted on being escorted by the Uchiha prodigy, but after nearly losing his life, he was not willing to take any more risks. Utakata turned to the bear-masked Anbu. Protect the daimyo well. Leave a message if you return before us. Bear nodded, understanding the urgency. The fire capital wasn't far from their current location, and for the Anbu, it would take much less time to travel there and back to the Leaf Village compared to a squad with injured and dead members. With a final farewell to the daimyo, Utakata made his way back to his team, who were sitting under the tree. Meanwhile, Utakata's clone had already healed the injured people. Fortunately, none of them were dead, and most didn't even have severe injuries, they had only been trapped under Genjutsu. The Jonin had sustained minor wounds, but nothing too serious. When the Jonin finally woke up, he immediately went on high alert, remembering the attack. However, his stance relaxed when he saw Utakata and the others also waking up. But he froze again upon seeing one of his students cradling another, who was clearly dead. Utakata didn't offer any comfort. Handle your team, Jonin, he ordered, before dispelling his clone. The real Utakata approached his own team and saw that Ren was asleep, while Yujao and Hitoshi were sitting nearby, keeping watch. He bent down and placed his hand on Ren's forehead, emitting a soft green glow as healing chakra enveloped the boy. Ren's tense body gradually relaxed, his breathing evening out as he fell into a deeper, more restful sleep. Utakata also checked his other two students for injuries when Yujao spoke up, her voice tinged with concern. Sensei, are you okay? And Ren? Utakata gave her a reassuring nod. I'm fine. Ren is fine too. He just overworked his brain and body far too much, so he needs to rest. Don't wake him up for now. I'll let you know when we're ready to move. Both Yujao and Hitoshi nodded, relieved to hear that Ren was really alright. As Utakata moved a bit away, Yujao kept her eyes on Ren, her expression soft and worried. A quiet voice broke the silence. I shouldn't be, but I'm glad we don't have to go through that, Hitoshi said, his gaze directed at Itachi's teammates. One of them was sobbing quietly, holding on to the lifeless body of their fallen friend. Yujao followed his gaze and nodded silently, unable to bring herself to look for too long. Chapter 54, in the room with the big men and old men, a group of shinobi was traveling swiftly through the trees, leaping from one branch to another. Their headbands bore the symbol of the Hidden Leaf Village. Team 1, along with Itachi's team, had departed soon after the daimyo's procession was entrusted to the Anbu for escort. For safety, Utakata took up the rear, while the other Jonin led from the front, effectively sandwiching the four Gainins between them. Ren, still asleep, was being carried by Utakata. Yujao's had tried to wake him earlier but was refused by Utakata. The deceased Gainin was sealed within a scroll carried by the other Jonin. They had been traveling for nearly half a day when Ren finally woke up. Realizing he was being carried, Ren understood that his teammates hadn't woken him. He spoke up, Sensei, I'm fine now. I can travel on my own. Utakata nodded, setting him down as they continued moving. I've already checked your body, Utakata explained. You overworked both your brain and body trying to keep up with the masked man, which left you feeling lethargic. There shouldn't be any lingering issues, but let me know if you feel unwell. Ren nodded and followed the team. Utakata flickered to the front of the formation, taking the lead and increasing the pace. The rest of the group had to adjust to match his speed. As the team continued moving, Yujao, Hitoshi, and Itachi glanced back at Ren, silently checking on him. Ren gave a small nod, indicating that he was alright, and the three turned their focus forward again. Ren, now at the back of the formation, glanced at Itachi and noticed level 62-inch displayed above his head. Itachi's level had risen by 13 levels after awakening his two Tomoe Sharingan. Ren couldn't help but feel wary. A massive level increase like that wouldn't happen with just any Uchiha. It's probably because it's Itachi. But even with his power-up, it doesn't mean he'll have a clear advantage over me, Ren thought. He mentally reassured himself, remembering that he had Genjutsu resistance for a 3 Tomoe Sharingan and enhanced reflexes to counter the Sharingan, but he still wanted to test it out to be completely sure. His mind wandered to the deceased Genin. In the original story, he was supposed to die when rushing at Obito, but this time he died protecting Itachi. That's a change. Still, Obito left right after seeing Itachi awaken his Sharingan, just like in canon. Maybe getting injured wasn't in his plan, but he didn't seem to be too bothered by it. Could it all have been part of his scheme to trigger Itachi's Sharingan? Has he already started planning the Uchiha massacre? Ren sighed inwardly. I need to be extremely cautious too. During the fight, he already mentioned that I reminded him of Minato, which is true I guess since Minato was the only one who had ever reacted to Obito's speed till now. It was due to his reflexes which I think should be one tier above mine. If Obito gets any ideas, it could put me in serious danger. Even though I managed to injure him, he was right when he said it was because he was playing around. If he got serious, I wouldn't stand a chance. Forget counterattacking, I'd have to give it my all just to survive. Ren clenched his fists, feeling a bit frustrated. All that ninjutsu training, and it turned out to be useless against an opponent like Obito or anyone with special eyes, for that matter. I need to figure out how to use Rasengan without drawing suspicion. I know how to learn it, but explaining how I know it will be tricky. He frowned in thought. And speed. I have to work on that too. My current training is good, but it's not enough. Maybe I should start investing points in agility instead of just vitality and chakra. But I'll look around and ask for advice before making that decision. There might be other methods to boost my speed that I haven't considered. Ren let out another deep sigh. I thought I was doing everything I could, and that I still had time to get stronger. But suddenly I had to face a final boss-level opponent when I'm barely mid-tier myself. Lost in his thoughts, Ren continued to follow the group as they made their way back to Hidden Leaf Village. It took one night and a few extra hours before the team finally reached Hidden Leaf Village. They had taken a few hours to rest during the night, which made them a bit later than expected. As they entered through the village gate, Utakata and the other Jonin went to report to the guards. Ren took this opportunity to approach Itachi. Are you okay? He asked quietly. Itachi managed a small smile and gave a slight nod. Yes, he replied. Ren looked at him for a moment, sensing the emotional turmoil behind that simple response. Then he stepped back, his thoughts shifting. Now that he's awakened the Sharingan, Itachi's going to start questioning a lot of things. He'll probably go all philosophical with Shisui. It's about time I stop interacting with him altogether. Even though our interactions are few and far between, I don't want to get caught up in his and Shisui's ideals. If Obito really started observing Itachi after his Sharingan awakened, I can't afford to become part of his or Denzo's schemes. Better to keep my distance. Soon, Utakata and the other Jonin returned from speaking with the guards and went to their respective teams. Utakata addressed his students. Yujao, Hitoshi, you two can go home. We'll meet the day after tomorrow to resume training, so take this time to rest. The two nodded, but Utakata continued as he turned to Ren. Ren, you come with me to meet the Hokage. Since you managed to injure that man, he'll want to hear from you directly. The three nodded in acknowledgement. Yujao and Hitoshi waved goodbye to Ren before heading off, eager to rest after the long journey. Ren, meanwhile, remained beside Utakata, his mind already planning his next steps. If I inform the Hokage about Obito's abilities, it could make a huge difference. I can't deal with him myself for now, but that doesn't mean the other powerhouses in the village can't. If they know his intangibility trick, they'll have a much easier time handling him. Besides, I might get some rewards from the system by doing so. I already have 3 pending rewards, 1 for completing the mission, 1 for fighting Obito, and 1 for participating in Itachi's awakening. Giving crucial information might just get me another since no one knows about Obito's abilities at this time. Ren waited with Utakata while the other Jonin, whose name he still didn't know, finished talking to his students. Once the Jonin was done, he nodded to Utakata and Ren. Without another word, all 3 of them flickered to the Hokage Tower. Once the 3 reached the Hokage Tower, they moved directly toward the Hokage's office on the top floor. Just as they approached the door, a voice from inside called out, "Come in." As they stepped inside, Ren barely had time to process the room before someone lunged at him. Instinctively, he rolled out of the way, only to look up and see his father, Juichi, rushing over with a worried expression. Without paying any mind to Ren's quick dodge, Juichi closed the distance and started checking him over. "Are you okay, brat? You fought the masked man?" he asked, his voice tense. Ren looked at him in surprise. "Dad. What are you doing here?" "And yeah, I'm fine, no serious injuries from fighting the guy." Before Juichi could respond, a cold voice cut through the room. "I am sure we have more pressing matters, and this can surely wait." Ren looked up and saw the one speaking was the one-eyed Cyclops, the most hated man in the Naruto universe, Denzo I Love Sharingan Shimura. Near the window stood a tall man with a wild mane of white hair, none other than Jiraiya the pervy sage. There was also an Anbu ninja with a bear mask, Shikakueta Dragnara with his trademark pineapple hairstyle, and, of course, Hiruzen I Will Take Care of Naruto's Sarutobi, the third Hokage himself. He figured that all of them must have received a brief report of what happened, which was why important people were here, especially Jiraiya. Ren glanced at his father and noticed Juichi scoff at Denzo's interruption. Juichi straightened up and stood behind Ren, giving him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Seeing the tension ease a little, Hiruzen addressed the group. "Let's not waste any time and begin. Jonin Soma, proceed." Ren's attention shifted to the other Jonin, whom he had been mentally labeling as the other Jonin all this time. Soma cleared his throat and began his report. "Everything was normal for the first 2 days after my team left the village. I corresponded with Bear every 2 hours, as per protocol while escorting the daimyo. Bear can confirm that everything was in order." The Anbu with the bear mask nodded in confirmation. Soma continued, "On the 3rd day, during our first break, I attempted to communicate with Bear and his unit, but none of them responded. Sensing something was wrong, I alerted the daimyo and prepared to move the procession. However, before we could move, the masked man attacked. He knocked out all the civilians except the daimyo, his guards, and my team. I attempted to fight him but was knocked out almost instantly. That's all I remember before waking up." Hiruzen nodded thoughtfully. "You may leave and submit a written report by evening." Soma gave a respectful bow. "Yes, Lord Hokage." With that, he exited the room. Turning to the Anbu operative, Hiruzen gave a slight nod. "There." The Anbu operative stepped forward and gave his report. "Our unit was attacked by a group of cloak-wearing ninjas. Despite our efforts, they kept getting back up even after being fatally injured. After a few sacrifices, we confirmed they were not human. Their bodies exhibited plant-like abilities. Before we could investigate further, they all merged into the ground and disappeared. A few of my men attempted to track them underground, but they found no trace." Hiruzen's expression remained serious as he nodded. "Understood. You may go." Bear gave a respectful nod and flickered out of the room. Hiruzen then turned to Utakata. "Utakata, begin." Utakata began his report. Firstly, the masked man identified himself as Madara Uchiha. When he saw Itachi Uchiha awaken his Sharingan, he stated that he would keep an eye on him. A ripple of surprise passed through the room at the mention of Madara's name. Denzo immediately cut in, his voice sharp. "Itachi Uchiha has awakened his Sharingan?" Utakata didn't even spare him a glance, continuing his report as if he hadn't been interrupted. Ren couldn't help but notice Juichi snickering softly behind him, and he was just as intrigued by how Utakata completely ignored Denzo's intrusion. "I really have to ask Dad about his team today. Otherwise, it doesn't even make sense for him to be standing here like this," Ren thought. Utakata resumed speaking. "Our team had just left Otafukage town when we received the emergency signal. We immediately moved to investigate. Upon arrival at the scene, we found one of the genin who is now deceased rushing at the masked man. However, Genin Ren intervened and saved him the first time, allowing us to distance ourselves from the enemy. It was at that moment that I identified the masked man as the same one responsible for the Nine Tails attack." Chapter 55, Add Denzo Hate Gifts and Memes. Here Utakata continued his report. "Last time, I only had a brief interaction with that man, so I didn't know much about his abilities except for the fact that he had a strange Sharingan. However, this time, we uncovered some critical information. At the beginning, I engaged him in a brief battle, but all my attacks passed through his body without causing any damage. Meanwhile, he was able to hit me effortlessly. Taking advantage of an opening, he vanished in a swirl-like pattern and moved to attack the genin. Fortunately, Genin Ren managed to save himself and his teammates in time, preventing any injuries. The masked man, however, made another strike." Utakata glanced at Ren, signaling him to continue the explanation. Ren stepped forward and began speaking. "The masked man attacked me with his sword. Just before the blade could land a fatal hit, I managed to dodge enough that the sword strike was no longer life-threatening. It was about to." Ren was abruptly cut off as a harsh voice interrupted him. "You expect us to believe that? When a Jonin couldn't dodge the attack, you could." Ren glanced at the speaker and saw that it was Denzo. Before he could respond, Jiraiya chimed in with a casual tone. I think we got a glimpse of that when he just entered the room, Jiraiya said, hinting at Ren's earlier quick dodge from his father's grasp. He gave a nod. Go on. Ren continued, raising his gloved hand to reveal his claws. The sword ended up cutting through my left arm, but just as it was slicing me, I counterattacked with my claws. He demonstrated by flexing his claws. However, my claws passed straight through his body without making contact. At the same moment, the sword also stopped cutting into my arm and seemed to phase through it instead. Hiruzen's eyes narrowed in contemplation as he muttered to himself, he can't attack while he is intangible. Yuikata nodded, affirming the statement. Yes, we reached the same conclusion after conducting some tests. I took it upon myself to keep him busy and attack whenever possible. Meanwhile, Ren, due to his quick reaction time, would counterattack whenever the masked man tried to hit me. In this way, we were able to synchronize our moves and maintain pressure on him. However, just as we confirmed our hypothesis, he revealed another ability. Ren took over the explanation once more. The swirl-like pattern he used to disappear earlier wasn't just for teleportation, it could also be used to suck in ninjutsu. More importantly, it could absorb people, but it seemed to require direct contact. He didn't use it before grabbing Sensei's wrist. Sensei was on the verge of being sucked in when I attacked, and this time, he couldn't defend himself or make himself intangible before he stopped his other ability and Sensei was free. After that he attacked others but stopped when Itachi awakened his Sharingan. Ren stopped, feeling confident that the explanation was clear enough to convey Obito's abilities. Jiraiya looked like he wanted to say something, but Hiruzen raised his hand to stop him, his expression softening as he looked at Ren. Good job, young Ren, Hiruzen praised. Your intelligence and abilities have brought us invaluable information. The village will surely reward you for your efforts. You may leave now. Ren gave a nod. Yes, Lord Hokage. Juichi clapped his son on the shoulder and said, I'll meet you at home. Ren nodded again and quietly left the office. As soon as Ren exited the office, the atmosphere inside the room shifted significantly. Hiruzen leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers rhythmically on the desk. After a moment of contemplation, he asked, anything you want to add? Yuikata shook his head calmly, indicating that Ren had covered everything important. Jiraiya, however, began to speak up. If that guy's abilities are just as the kid described, then Minato shouldn't have had any problem dealing with him. His speed and reaction time should have been more than enough to do what these two did together and even better. Yuikata responded without hesitation, he had a hostage, sensei. Plus, the Nine Tails was under his control. Jiraiya frowned but shook his head in disagreement. Even if that masked man took Naruto, Minato shouldn't have had much trouble dealing with him first, especially since he knew Sensei was dealing with the Nine Tails. There's something we still don't know about that night. Did the man say anything else? Yuikata paused to think before replying. He seemed to harbor a deep hatred toward both Minato and the Leaf Village. He even said that Ren reminded him of Minato, the biggest hypocrite of Hidden Leaf Village, as he put it. Juichi gave a thoughtful hum and added, there aren't many people who would hate Minato to that extent, especially not an Uchiha. Minato had good relations with the Uchiha clan and could have easily accommodated them in the village if given the chance. He glanced pointedly at Denzo, who scoffed dismissively. The Uchiha are always a problem. It wouldn't surprise me if one of them went rogue to harm the village. Juichi immediately retorted, yeah, right. As if you'd tolerate a rogue Uchiha with a Sharingan. Sorry, a Mangekyo Sharingan. You'd be the first to target a person like that. Hiruzen raised his hand, signaling them to stop the argument. He then gestured to one of the Anbu. Call Fugaku. Shikaku, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke up. If that man's abilities are as we suspect, dealing with him would be difficult for anyone other than you, Lord Hokage, Lord Jiraiya, or Lady Tsunade. I'll issue orders to all Jonin to be on the lookout and to stay cautious. Hiruzen nodded in agreement as Shikaku asked, should we sell the information about his abilities to other villages first or directly update the bingo book? Hiruzen thought for a moment before replying. Sell it. Every village would be interested in the one who caused Minato's death. However, hold off on informing the Cloud Village for now, it will be useful in the upcoming negotiations. Shikaku nodded, already having the same idea, but knowing the Hokage's approval was necessary. As he left, Fugaku Uchiha entered the office. He greeted everyone except Denzo with a respectful nod. How may I be of service, Lord Hokage? Hiruzen looked at him seriously. I believe Itachi has informed you of the events from his mission. Fugaku nodded, and Hiruzen continued. I want you to look into every Uchiha who has gone missing, been declared dead, or had any unusual circumstances since the foundation of the Leaf Village. Check for any connections with Madara Uchiha and whether any of them had even the slightest link with Minato. Before Fugaku could respond, Denzo interrupted with a sneer. Humphrey, it would be better if Root handled the investigation. That way, we can ensure there are no errors or cover-ups. Fugaku's expression hardened, but Hiruzen spoke firmly before he could react. I trust Fugaku to handle this matter efficiently, Denzo. Isn't that right, Fugaku? Fugaku couldn't refuse, as refusing would undoubtedly lead to demands to hand over clan information. He understood the gravity of the situation and reluctantly nodded. Yes, Lord Hokage. Good. You may leave. After Fugaku left, Denzo got up as well, his tone curt. I will have my ninja keep an eye out. As he left, Juichi muttered sarcastically, Whoa, now the Leafs ninja are your own ninja. Denzo glared at Juichi but refrained from saying anything, choosing to leave quietly. Jiraiya stood up next. I'll see if I can dig up any information. There's bound to be something out there. Once Jiraiya was gone, only Hiruzen and Utakata remained in the room. Hiruzen lit his pipe, taking a slow puff before speaking. What do you think we should give young Ren as a reward? He was instrumental in the mission and saved many lives including yours. The daimyo should also be pleased with him. Utakata nodded. The daimyo did mention that he would send a reward. As for what the village should give him, although he managed to react to that man, his speed wasn't quite sufficient. Something to boost his speed would be appropriate. Additionally, while his taijutsu is fine for now, it may start to lag behind his ninjutsu in the future. Lady Tsunada's chakra-enhanced strength technique would fit him well. Since I'll be starting medical ninja training with the team soon, it shouldn't be too difficult for him to pick up. Hiruzen hummed, considering the suggestion. I thought you wanted him to be like Minato, so I expected you might just ask for the Flying Thunder God technique. If I give him these new jutsus, he'll deviate from the traditional speed-type path. Utakata thought for a moment before replying. His Fuin jutsu isn't advanced enough to learn the Flying Thunder God just yet, which is why I recommend the other techniques. That said, if you do decide to give him the Flying Thunder God, I'm sure he would be delighted. I'll also be teaching him the Rasengan soon. If he had used it instead of his claws during the battle, that man would have taken serious damage or perhaps even been killed. Hiruzen nodded in agreement. Very well. You may teach him the Rasengan. I'll grant him permission to select 2 jutsus from the Scroll of Seals and add a few non-essential ones as well. I'll include the 8 Inner Gates technique and Tsuna's chakra-enhanced strength. He's a smart boy, he'll understand our intention. Hiruzen then looked at Utakata with a faint smile. Now that his rewards are settled, what about yours? What do you want? Without missing a beat, Utakata replied, money. Hiruzen chuckled, knowing that Utakata needed nothing except money since over the years the man had opportunities to get anything he wanted from the village with his exceptional record. Very well. I'll ensure that you receive a generous mission bonus. You've done well, Utakata. Utakata gave a nod, and with that, the debriefing finally concluded. Chapter 56. The Christmas is early this time. Ren returned home and immediately headed for the bathroom, eager to take a proper bath after his long mission. As he soaked in the warm water, he let his thoughts wander. Even though I didn't say anything directly, they're all smart enough to figure out just how dangerous Obito's abilities can be. It's frustrating that I can't just lay out everything I know, but even I'm not completely sure about some of his powers. He frowned as he recalled how Kakashi went into Obito's dimension during the canon timeline. Kakashi managed to leave Obito's dimension using Kami, but besides that, probably only a Rin Sharingan user could escape on their own. Even the Flying Thunder God can't get out since it's a completely sealed space. If Obito had really sucked Sensei in, it would have been over. Obito could just teleport out while leaving Sensei trapped. Ren shook his head. The only real counter is using insane reflexes and speed or somehow tricking him into sucking in a clone. But that's tricky, especially since the Sharingan can easily identify a shadow clone. Obito's definitely one of the top threats, probably the third strongest after Ten-Tails Madara and Kaguya. Most enemies I can just brute force through, but with these guys, it'll take something else entirely. He sighed and stood up, finishing his bath. Good luck, future me. I'll leave these problems to you. After getting dressed, Ren headed to the kitchen, realizing that there was nothing prepared. He decided to cook something simple and sat down to eat just as the door opened and Juichi walked in. Oh, I thought you'd take a while, so I didn't make anything for you, Ren said, looking at his father. Juichi shook his head, waving off the concern. Nah, I'm not hungry. You go ahead and eat, nothing like real food after living on ration pills during a mission. He sat down across from Ren, giving him a searching look. Are you really alright? What did Utakata say? Ren nodded, swallowing a bite of his meal. Yeah, I'm fine. The only injury I had was from the sword, but Sensei healed it on the spot. He said the rest was just exhaustion from overworking my brain and body to keep up with the masked man. Juichi let out a relieved sigh. Well, as long as you're fine. Not many people can say they survived fighting Madara Uchiha. Ren snorted at that. Yeah, right. If he were really Madara, I might as well claim to be the third Hokage. No way the great Madara Uchiha would let a kid more than half a century younger than him injure him. Juichi just smiled and shook his head. Whatever you say. You should still be happy that your mission report will mention fighting a man claiming to be Madara Uchiha even if it was a fake. Ren continued eating, but after a while, curiosity got the better of him. But how were you allowed in the Hokage's office? And how come you were able to listen to the mission report? You were also pretty disrespectful to that man, and he seemed important. Juichi's expression turned serious. Listen, brat, be careful around that man. His name is Denzo Shimura, and he leads a unit similar to the Anbu, but way shadier. I can't tell you much, but steer clear of him. He's not someone you should associate with. Ren showed a perfect mix of wariness and confusion as Juichi added, but that doesn't mean you should be afraid of him. The only thing a person should be scared of is yourself, nothing else, not even death. If you're scared of something, you can never face it. Always be brave, but don't turn into an idiot who jumps into something just because he fears nothing. Keep your caution balanced. Ren nodded, taking his father's advice. Juichi leaned back, his tone softening. As for why I was allowed in the room. Well, the old man likes me. He'd never admit it, but it's true. Ren raised an eyebrow. The Hokage likes you? Juichi chuckled. Yeah. Besides that, it's because my sensei was Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin and the Hokage's own student. Me and Utakata know some serious stuff, so they let us in on important things. Ren's eyes widened in surprise. Wait. You were the teammate of the fourth Hokage? He had some doubts, but he never expected his father to be teammates with the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, himself. Juichi grinned. Yeah. Me and Utakata were in the same class, but Minato was younger. He graduated early, so we were all put on the same team under Jiraiya-sensei. Even though Minato was a genius, he was kind of annoying back then, always trying to help everyone he met. A nostalgic smile appeared on Juichi's face as he continued, talking about his younger days and how they trained under Jiraiya. He shared stories of Minato's progress and how the team grew together. Ren listened quietly, fascinated to learn more about his father's past and his connection to some of the greatest ninjas in the Naruto-verse. Eventually, after sharing a few more stories, Juichi stood up, stretching. Alright, brat. Rest up, you've had a long day. You did good out there. Ren nodded, feeling a little more at ease. Got it, Dad. With that, Juichi ruffled his hair lightly before heading to his own room, leaving Ren to finish his meal. Ren went to his room and lay down on his bed, feeling the familiar comfort after a week of missions and rough sleeping conditions. Man, I never thought Dad would turn out to be one of Jiraiya's students. That actually explains a lot, like how he managed to get a job under the Jonin commander so easily and why I got such good quality weapons without much fuss. He thought to himself, mulling over the implications. I was worried I'd have to put in a ton of effort to get into the Hokage's camp, but it turns out I'm already considered part of it. Still, it's smart to keep building my reputation as a young genius with great potential. At least Hiruzen won't try to traumatize me like Denzo did with Itachi. Being useful should keep me safe from his schemes. Now I can openly be cautious around Denzo without raising suspicion. People will just think it's natural for Dad to tell me to be wary of a shady guy like him. But still, even though I know I've got some backing now, I shouldn't get complacent. Nothing really changes just because of that. Ren thought about his future training. Since Dad and Sensei were both Minato's teammates, there's a good chance one of them knows the Rasengan. I should ask them about it. If I can learn it from them, I'll have a solid cover story for using it, and even if I develop the Rasen Shuriken later on, it'll be easy to justify by saying I thought of adding wind style to the Rasengan. Ren continued planning things and left the task of opening rewards until night as he always did. He had checked, and now there was indeed a fourth reward for making a change in the canon. Ren went down to the basement to train since he was fully recovered and still had time before nightfall. He moved through his usual exercises and drills, pushing his limits to keep his body in top shape. Once he was done and had completed his cool-down stretches, he finally sat down to open the system and check his rewards. He opened the first reward. System notification: congratulations for completing your first A-rank mission. Rewards: 10 Jonin level points, 2 advanced mastery points. Note: this reward is for the first time completion of an A-rank mission. Future rewards will depend on the mission difficulty and the user's strength. Ren nodded as he read through the message. Since A-rank missions are typically meant for Jonin-level squads or individuals, it makes sense that the rewards are appropriate. I'll wait until I've claimed all the rewards before assigning the points. Next, he opened the second reward. System notification: congratulations user for participating in the canon event, Awakening of Itachi Uchiha's Sharingan. Rewards: Fire Style Mastery -40%, Basic, Ganjutsu, 40 out of 100. Note: the rewards are given according to the changes made in the outcome of the event. Ren felt a surge of new information flood his mind about fire style techniques and Ganjutsu concepts that pushed his skills to the limit of Chunin range. Not bad. Even though it's not exactly what I wanted, gaining a new affinity and some solid Ganjutsu progress is still good. Plus, fire style mastery at the basic level means I can start using more advanced techniques later on. He reflected on the message for a moment. Since the system rewards are based on changes to the original canon outcome, this is actually quite generous. I didn't really make any significant changes. Itachi still awakened his Sharingan as he was supposed to, and the person who died was meant to die anyway. The only difference might be the reveal of Madara's name. Just as that thought crossed his mind, he felt a small jolt of clarity. INT+1, Ren's eyes lit up. So I was right. The system rewarded me not for Itachi's awakening itself but for the reveal of Madara's name. That means the real change I caused wasn't in the event itself but in how Obito revealed himself as Madara so early. At this point in time, nobody except Nagato and Yahiko should have known about him identifying as Madara, but since he revealed himself after our fight, it changed, hence the reward. Since he had had the system for a while now, he had figured out how to assess if he was right or wrong. If the system rewards him with an intelligence stat, then he was right. If not, he would continue to ponder until he received the point to figure if he was correct or not. It's good to know that the system rewards me for smart thinking. At least I've got a way to gauge whether my deductions are correct. Once he was done with the second reward, he moved on to the third reward. Chapter 57, Space and Time Are the Lords of the Universe, Part 2. Ren pumped his fist in the air as he saw the rewards. The 3 level-ups were great on their own, but what truly caught his attention was the major space affinity. Space affinity is one of the rarest elements in the entire Naruto universe. Only a select few have it, like Tobirama, Minato, Obito, Kakashi, and Sasuke. I can't think of anyone else who naturally possesses it, and now I have it. Not just basic or minor, but major level affinity. The moment the reward was given, Ren felt something shift around him. The area around him seemed different, distorted in a way he couldn't quite put his finger on. It feels weird. Almost like I can sense something that wasn't there before. I guess I need to increase my mastery over the space element before I can properly understand it. He then moved on to the second part of the reward, Enhanced Reflexes. Extreme Enhanced Reflexes. Ren's grin widened. His reflexes had already proven themselves when he fought Obito, but now they had advanced to an even higher level. This is my first extreme talent. If my reflexes were impressive before, now they must be on another level entirely. I need to test this out later. Ren couldn't help but feel proud. These rewards made the risk he took during the fight worthwhile. After a moment of collecting himself, he moved on to the last reward. System notification: congratulations, user, for making a change in the canon revelation of Obito Uchiha's abilities before time. Rewards: Space Mastery -25%, Basic. As the notification appeared, Ren felt the previous odd sensation intensify. It was as if he became more aware of the space around him, sensing subtle shifts and distortions in a small radius. It's almost like a sensory ability, but it's different from typical sensory techniques. It's purely spatial awareness. Ren took a deep breath, steadying himself as the new knowledge settled in. Honestly, I thought I'd get a higher reward for revealing Obito's abilities so much earlier. But if I think about it, the system only rewards based on the outcome of the change. He pondered for a moment. Just because his abilities are known now doesn't mean anyone can do anything about it. Maybe top-tier fighters like Jiraiya could defend themselves or sneak in a hit, but truly defeating Obito would still be nearly impossible. The only one who could have done it was Minato, who was already dead. Aside from him, maybe only the Raikage could react to Obito. So the real change is just that his abilities are now known, not that anyone can counter him yet. Once Ren was done claiming all the rewards, he moved on to allocating the 10 Jonin level points he had received. Thanks to the 3 level ups he had just obtained, every stat had already increased by 3 points. His current level was 46, with his lowest stat being strength at 46. His highest stat, on the other hand, was vitality, which had now reached 61 after including the level up bonuses. Ren had always prioritized vitality ever since he found out that having a higher vitality compared to his trainable stats allowed him to train them, STR and AG, at a faster pace. Additionally, vitality and chakra were also connected since every 3 points in vitality resulted in 1 point in chakra. With that reasoning in mind, he allocated 6 points to vitality. Vitality plus 6, chakra 2. Since the 6 vitality points granted him 2 additional chakra points, he used the remaining 4 points directly on chakra, maximizing his chakra reserves. Chakra plus 4, once done, he opened the system panel. Status panel, name, Ren Takahashi, level, 46, health points, 6,700 out of 6,700, chakra points, 6,600 out of 6,600, attribute, strength, 46, agility, 55, intelligence, 56, vitality, 67, chakra, 66, available points, 0, talents, improved chakra control, enhanced reflexes, X, Ganjutsu resistance, A rank, Fuinjutsu, major talent, mastery panel, chakra control, 79%, advanced, fast fist taijutsu, 85%, advanced, shuriken jutsu, 88%, advanced, shadow clone mastery, 80%, advanced, wind style mastery, 76%, advanced, earth style mastery, 73%, intermediate, chakra enhancement mastery, 40%, basic, fuinjutsu mastery, 20%, beginner, yang release mastery, 16%, beginner, fire style mastery, 40%, basic, space style mastery, 25%, basic, mastery points, 3 intermediate level points, 5 advanced level points, ninja panel, ninjutsu, 56 out of 100, taijutsu, 50 out of 100, ganjutsu, 40 out of 100, fuinjutsu, 20 out of 100. His vitality had now reached 67, making it more than 21 points higher than his strength. This gap would allow him to rapidly increase his strength through training, as his enhanced vitality would support the physical strain. His chakra was now at 66, which he felt was sufficient for the time being. Considering that his most powerful techniques were B-rank jutsus, each using less than 500 chakra points, he estimated that even A-rank jutsus would require under 1,000 points. Only S-rank techniques would likely demand more than that. In the near future he had plans for learning Rasengan, which is a super advanced A-rank jutsu, and landing even one hit would be game over for anyone who is not a high-level jonin or those without weird healing abilities, like Kabuto. Although he wasn't entirely sure how much chakra the Rasengan would consume, he felt confident that his reserves would be enough for at least a few powerful bursts. Next, he checked his mastery panel. There weren't many changes except for the newly added affinities and abilities. He noticed that he now had 3 intermediate level mastery points and 5 advanced level mastery points. Ren decided to save these points for crucial abilities like Yang Release and Space Style, and the Yin Release he would eventually unlock. He couldn't help but feel a bit puzzled about why he hadn't unlocked Yin Release yet, despite his Ganjutsu improving significantly. Maybe I'm missing something, or perhaps I haven't met the right conditions yet. Either way, I just have to be patient. Unfortunately, he didn't have any beginner-level mastery points right now. If he did, he would have definitely used them to boost his Yang Release mastery. Satisfied with his progress and having confirmed all the changes, Ren closed the system interface and slept. Ren woke up the next morning, completed his morning training, and returned home since there was no scheduled training for the day. After taking a bath, he joined his father, Juichi, for breakfast. They chatted casually while eating, and as he finished first, Juichi stood up to leave for work. Juichi said, "All right, brat, I'll head to work. Take care, and if you feel unwell, check in with Utakata just before heading out." Juichi tossed a scroll to Ren, who caught it effortlessly. "Oh, and here I've seen how you abuse shadow clones, so this will be more helpful to you. Remember, though, this is a forbidden jutsu, so use it cautiously." Ren opened the scroll and was pleasantly surprised to find it contained the multi-shadow clone jutsu, an advanced version of the B-rank shadow clone jutsu. This technique allowed the user to create numerous solid clones, with the chakra equally divided among them. Excited by the new technique, Ren quickly finished his breakfast and headed to the basement to test it out. After carefully reading the scroll and memorizing the hand signs, which were the same as the normal shadow clone jutsu, he decided to start small. He made 2 clones, noticing that his chakra immediately dropped to 2,200 out of 6,600, exactly 1/3 of his total. Satisfied with the result, he released the jutsu and regained his chakra. Checking his mastery panel, he noticed that his mastery of the original shadow clone jutsu had been replaced with multi-shadow clone jutsu at 60%, intermediate, a significant drop from the 80%, advanced, mastery he previously had. Curious, He tested making normal clones and found that he could still perform them just as efficiently, meaning that the system had simply substituted the higher level technique while retaining his original progress. A system notification appeared in front of his eyes. Congratulations user for learning your first forbidden jutsu. Reward, 2 master level mastery point, can increase the mastery at master level by 2%. His eyes widened slightly as he saw the reward. This was the first reward he had gotten for master level, but it was of no use to him for now since he didn't even have any mastery at the master level, so he just left it as it is. Once he was done checking the jutsu and the reward, he started making clones for the day's practice. This time, he made 6 clones, each with 1,100 chakra points. Since he couldn't yet distribute chakra unevenly before he reached advanced mastery, he had the intermediate level mastery points, but he didn't dump them into the jutsu since there was no need. 3 clones focused on his elemental affinities, wind, earth, and fire. The wind and earth clone had jutsus to practice, but he made a clone for fire style to see what kind of information he has for the fire style and how he would develop it in the future. 1 clone dedicated itself to yang release training and another worked on space style mastery with the same purpose as the clone made for fire style. The final clone divided into 11 clones to practice fu in jutsu. With all his clones efficiently assigned to different tasks, Ren went outside to continue his physical training. He went to training ground 1 to continue his physical training since it was the perfect place and no one would poke around unnecessarily. Once there he saw it was empty and neither Yujao nor Hitoshi were there for training. Even though it was an off day, he believed training would be better than rest for now. Not minding it, he began his training. Since his vitality was significantly higher than his strength and agility, his body was already conditioned to endure intense training. He decided to start with normal strength building exercises but in high numbers like 500 push-ups, 500 squats etc. After completing his strength exercises, he moved on to speed and agility drills. Since he had done high-speed huge weight running in the early morning, he did training for increasing his speed in small distance for instant high speed. He also made a clone which divided itself in more and all of them through pebbles, stones, kunais and shurikens at Ren. He did this to test his extreme enhanced reflexes and to get used to them. Sometimes he could also feel the attack coming from a distance, which was likely a result of the space affinity he got. After completing his physical routine, Ren took a moment to sit under the shade of a tree and catch his breath. Then after a little while he activated the multi-shadow clone jutsu again and summoned 2 clones to practice taijutsu sparring with him. The sparring was fast-paced, and Ren was pleasantly surprised by how naturally his body moved and reacted to attacks. My reflexes are on another level now. I can almost predict their movements. If I can integrate this spatial awareness into my fighting style, I might be able to counter even faster and stronger opponents. When the clones dispersed, their experience flowed back to him. His body felt a little sore but nothing his vitality couldn't handle. As Ren was about to sit down and relax, he suddenly sensed movement behind him. Instinctively, he closed the gap in an instant and pointed his claws at the intruder. The masked figure remained unfazed, not even flinching at Ren's swift assault. It was an Anbu ninja, who spoke. Ren Takahashi, you are being called to the Hokage's office. Before Ren could respond, the Anbu flickered away. Ren relaxed his stance, retracting his claws. He wasn't particularly worried about his reaction. Any shinobi would have done the same if they sensed a presence sneaking up on them. Realizing that the summons might be related to the mission rewards, Ren straightened his clothes and set off toward the Hokage building. Chapter 58, Unnecessary Tests. Once Ren reached the Hokage tower, he headed straight to the top floor where the Hokage's office was located. On his way, nobody stopped him, allowing him to swiftly reach the office door. Just as he stood in front of it, a voice called out from inside, "Come in." Ren entered the office and immediately went down on one knee to greet the Hokage. "Hokage-sama," he said respectfully. Hiruzen gave a small smile upon seeing Ren and said, "Be at ease, young man. You have done an exceptional job this time, and you shall be rewarded accordingly." He paused briefly before continuing. "The original mission your team was sent on was a knee rank mission, for which you and your team will be compensated appropriately. Now, about your encounter with the masked man." Hiruzen's tone grew more serious. "I must ask you to keep it to yourself that the man identified himself as Madara Uchiha. You understand the kind of chaos such news could cause, right?" Ren nodded immediately. "Yes, Hokage-sama." Satisfied, Hiruzen continued, "As for the rewards, you will have 2 S-rank missions recorded in your file. The first is for engaging in combat with an S-class enemy responsible for the 4th Hokage's demise and the massive destruction of the village. The second is for bringing in crucial information about the enemy's abilities. In addition to these records, you will receive the respective rewards. The compensation from the daimyo will also be given to you at a later date." Ren nodded again, maintaining his expression despite the excitement he felt. The monetary reward was appealing, But it was the other rewards that he was hoping would be coming next that truly excited him. Hiruzen took out a large scroll and placed it on the table. "This here is the forbidden scroll," he said, looking at Ren. "Do you know what it is?" Ren gave a small nod. "Yes, Hokage-sama. I heard some kids in the class talk about it. They said it contains super powerful jutsus that are important to the village." Hiruzen nodded approvingly. "Precisely. The Forbidden Scroll holds techniques and jutsus developed by our predecessors, some of the most powerful techniques the village possesses. However, they are labeled forbidden not just because of their strength but because of their dangerous side effects that can harm the user." Ren listened intently as Hiruzen continued, "You may select 2 jutsus from this scroll. I will then hand over the detailed version of them to you. However, you are not permitted to share them with anyone. Doing so will have severe consequences. Understood?" Ren nodded without hesitation. He understood that techniques of such high value and power were not to be treated lightly. Leaking them would be unforgivable, no matter the reason. There was also the fact he didn't really have anyone who he would leak the contents to. Hiruzen smiled, pleased with Ren's understanding. What Ren didn't know was that most shinobi given access to the Forbidden Scroll were usually bound by sealing techniques to ensure confidentiality. However, just like any place else, Hidden Leaf Village also placed importance on connections, and due to Ren being Juichi's son, Hiruzen gave him the scroll without imposing any binding seals. "Very well," Hiruzen said, gesturing to a corner. "You may sit there and browse through the scroll." Ren bowed slightly. "Thank you, Hokage-sama." Ren stepped forward and picked up the scroll. It was almost half the length of Ren's height, so it was quite a sight for Hiruzen, who saw Ren holding the scroll. He took it and then sat in the corner. Once Ren sat down, he tried to open the scroll but couldn't. He glanced at Hiruzen, who was back to his work, and then back at the scroll. Focusing chakra in his eyes, he carefully examined the scroll and soon noticed a sealing formula. Ren frowned and took out a pencil and paper, deciding to draw the seal instead of attempting to unlock it directly. There was a detonation symbol that would go off if even one attempt was wrong. He carefully sketched the seal on the paper, analyzing it as he worked. The seal was a combination of symbols that didn't normally go together, like sharp and dull. As he traced the pattern, he noticed a connecting line that revealed the real locking seal hidden beneath layers of useless seals. Taking a deep breath, Ren passed Yang Chakra through the correct seal, and the scroll finally opened without any explosions. Unknown to Ren, Hiruzen smiled as he watched the boy successfully unlock the scroll. Ren opened the massive scroll and started browsing through the techniques listed. The first one he saw was a Ni-rank Ganjutsu called Mirror Image Creation Technique, created by Tobirama Senju. It cast an illusion where the target perceived their own reflection as hostile, essentially forcing them to fight a perfect copy of themselves. However, the drawbacks were significant. The technique had an enormous chakra cost and caused brain strain if maintained for too long. Ren took note of it and moved on. The next technique was another A-rank Ganjutsu called the Night of Despair, also created by Tobirama. It trapped the target in complete darkness, where shadows continuously attacked them. Once again, the drawbacks were high chakra usage and mental fatigue. Ren memorized the technique details and moved on. This is not the bringer of darkness jutsu. When he reached the third technique, he paused in surprise. It was an A-rank medical ninjutsu, chakra enhanced strength, created by Tsunade Senju. The technique drastically amplified physical power by concentrating chakra at a specific part of the body, usually the fists or legs, and releasing it at the moment of impact. The risks included potential injury if mishandled and the high learning requirements, but Ren immediately decided that he wanted this technique. It was proven to be incredibly strong, and he knew he could meet the requirements. Ren continued to the next jutsu and found another A-rank medical technique, Life Force Transfer Jutsu, also created by Tsunade. It was an inferior version of a jutsu from the Sand Village, designed to sacrifice the user's life to heal others. Tsunade copied this jutsu from the rumors she heard from the Sand Shinobi, so this technique was not entirely correct. Ren immediately skipped over it, having no interest in a jutsu that required self-sacrifice for others. As he reached the last technique on the scroll, his eyes widened. It was the 8 Inner Gates technique, an S-rank forbidden taijutsu created by Might Dewey. This technique was far stronger than the others. It was the only S-rank technique after all. Ren couldn't help but inwardly sigh. He could tell that this was likely one of the techniques they intended him to choose from the start along with Tsunade's jutsu, but they still made him choose just so that he could feel that he had a choice. Rolling the scroll back up, Ren stood and approached Hiruzen. "Hokage-sama, I want the chakra enhanced strength and the 8 Inner Gates technique," he said. Hiruzen chuckled softly. "Ho ho, good choice, I must say, young Ren." He took the scroll back and handed Ren a smaller one. "This contains the 8 Inner Gates technique, but I must warn you, this technique is extremely harmful to the body. Unless you are working under your sensei's guidance, You are not allowed to open gates beyond the third. Is that clear? Yes, Hokage-sama, Ren replied without hesitation. He wasn't sure if he would even learn the 8 gates technique as it was, so the matter of using higher gates wasn't something he needed to worry about for now. Hiruzen nodded approvingly and continued, your sensei will provide you with the other technique when you're ready. Now off you go. He waved Ren off, and Ren bowed respectfully. Thank you, Hokage-sama, he said before leaving the office. As Ren made his way home, Hiruzen watched him leave with a thoughtful smile. How long has it been since a young shinobi didn't try to actively impress me? He mused to himself. He really is Juichi's son, like father, like son. He thought, remembering how Juichi used to be in his youth. Hiruzen tapped his desk lightly and spoke to the air. Inform Utakata. A shadow flickered in the office as an Anbu operative left to carry out the order. Hiruzen smiled to himself and continued with his paperwork. After leaving the Hokage office, Ren headed straight home. Once inside, he made his way to the basement and sat down, eager to examine the scroll he had just received. However, when he tried to open it, he found it sealed shut once again. Letting out a frustrated sigh, Ren focused chakra into his eyes and saw yet another complex sealing formula. Why does that old man keep locking these scrolls with seals? Ren thought to himself as he began analyzing it. This one was even more intricate than the previous seal. After carefully examining it and figuring out a pattern, he cracked the seal, and the scroll finally opened. Inside was the complete 8 inner gates technique, along with special moves like Morning Peacock and others. Ren read through the entire scroll to confirm its authenticity and realized that it was indeed the same technique used by Guy and Lee. The technique worked by breaking through the body's 8 natural limiters, granting immense speed, strength, and power. However, it also inflicted extreme damage on the user's body. Ren frowned slightly as he considered the technique. The biggest issue wasn't the injuries but the uncontrollable surge of power. He didn't like the idea of losing control, even if it meant becoming incredibly strong. Despite his reservations, he decided to keep the technique because it was still one of the best options among the choices he had. Besides, he had hopes of improving it to make it safer and more controllable. He had been thinking about possible improvements for a while and eventually concluded that Fuinjutsu might be the key. As he read through the scroll, he noticed that the 8 gates released formation, the first inner gate, the gate of opening, open, had drawbacks like loss of focus, dizziness, and sudden power surges. However, he remembered that there were focus seals used to help children maintain clarity when they first awaken their chakra. If he could develop seals that activated simultaneously when opening the first gate, it might neutralize some of those side effects. It was just an idea for now, but it seemed like the most promising approach. To test it out, Ren dispelled all his Fuinjutsu clones and recreated them. This time, he assigned half of them to study the original techniques and the others to work on developing the new seals. Satisfied with his plan, Ren went outside to continue his physical training since he didn't have much else to do on his own. Chapter 59, Giving Existential Crisis to Utakata. The next day arrived, and after finishing his morning training, Ren headed to Training Ground 1. He greeted Yujao and Hitoshi, who were already there. Not long after, Utakata appeared and handed each of them a scroll. This scroll contains books that are necessary for becoming a medical ninja, Utakata explained. I want you all to go through the books at your own pace and inform me when you are ready. I will teach you the mystical palm jutsu soon since your chakra control is now sufficient. However, I will only teach you further medical ninjutsu if I see that you have any talent in this field or if you genuinely want to learn. The Gainans took the scrolls and put them away. Ren was particularly happy to receive the books. He knew that gaining sufficient medical knowledge was essential if he wanted to learn chakra-enhanced strength from Utakata. Eager to master it, he was more than willing to put in the effort to study. Team 1 began their team training for the day, working together until noon. Afterward, they broke off for individual training. Ren and Utakata sat facing each other. Utakata started the conversation. You have received your rewards, correct? He asked. Ren nodded, so Utakata continued, unlike the others, you don't have much of a choice here. If you want the technique, you have to study all the medical material and learn medical ninjutsu. The faster you do it, the faster you get the technique. Ren nodded again, fully aware of the necessity. Medical knowledge would be crucial not just for chakra-enhanced strength but also for making the 8 gates safer to use. In the meantime, Utakata said, I will teach you an extremely powerful ninjutsu that was created by the 4th Hokage himself. If you had this jutsu when you attacked that masked man, the damage would have been far more severe. Ren's eyes widened with excitement. He had been wanting to learn this technique anyway, and now his sensei was offering it without him even asking. Utakata stretched out his hand, and chakra began to gather, slowly forming into a spherical shape. The chakra spun faster and faster until it condensed into a spinning ball. Standing up, Utakata said, "This is called Rasengan." In a flash, Utakata flickered forward and slammed the Rasengan into the ground. A loud noise echoed through the training ground as pieces of the ground were blasted away, leaving behind a deep crater. Ren stared at the impact, excited to learn the jutsu. After all, his fighting style was a lot like Minato, so if he had the Rasengan he would slowly become a more complete fighter. Utakata flickered next to Ren, and the two sat down once again. Utakata began, "The Rasengan is an advanced A-rank jutsu, but what makes it special is that, in essence, it's just simple chakra manipulation without using hand signs. It involves high-speed rotation of chakra, which requires both chakra control and shape manipulation." He took out a bag filled with water balloons and grabbed one. Holding it in his hand, he said, "Look closely." Ren watched as the balloon became chaotic and suddenly burst. "This is the first step," Utakata explained. "Use chakra rotation to burst the balloon. Here, try it." He tossed a balloon to Ren, who caught it and held it carefully. Ren remembered that mastering the first step of Rasengan required spinning chakra in multiple directions simultaneously. He began by gathering chakra in the balloon and spinning it in one direction, but the balloon remained steady. He then separated a small portion of chakra and spun it in the opposite direction, which made the balloon slightly volatile. Repeating the process in multiple directions at high speed, he finally succeeded as the balloon suddenly burst. Ren looked at Utakata, who was staring at his hand. His expression said nothing. Utakata threw another balloon at him and said, "Explain while you do it again." Ren held the balloon and began, "At first, I tried spinning the chakra in a uniform manner, but it didn't work. So, I separated a bit of chakra and spun it in the opposite direction. Then I realized that I needed to rotate the chakra in multiple directions at once to cause the balloon to burst." As he finished explaining, the balloon burst once again. Utakata nodded slowly. "Keep practicing until it becomes second nature." Then he flickered away, leaving Ren to continue bursting the balloons one by one while waiting for his sensei to return. Meanwhile, Utakata was standing in front of a kid's store and said, "I want rubber balls." The shopkeeper nodded and asked, "How many do you need?" Utakata was about to say all of them but stopped himself. 5. "Give me 5 of them." After purchasing the rubber balls, he hesitated for a moment and decided to buy some balloons as well. Back at the training ground, Utakata appeared in front of Ren, who was still diligently bursting water balloons. "Stop," Utakata commanded. "This should be enough for the first step. The next task is this." He held up a rubber ball in his hand, and just like with the water balloon before, the ball burst under the pressure of spinning chakra. Handing one to Ren, he said, "Now try it." Ren knew that the second step was to increase the power of the rotation. He began the same way as before but this time added more force. The ball started moving violently and suddenly burst. He looked at Utakata, who simply handed him another ball. "Explain," Utakata said. Ren took the new ball and replied, "The rubber ball is stronger than the water balloon, so I had to increase the power of the rotation." As he finished speaking, the ball burst once again. Utakata nodded and picked up one of the balloons he had just bought. He blew air into it and held it in his hand. This time, however, nothing happened, and the balloon stayed perfectly still. Looking at Ren, he asked, "What do you think?" Ren studied the balloon for a moment before answering, "Either you're not doing anything, or you're stabilizing the spinning and power inside the balloon so that it doesn't burst." Utakata's lips twitched as the balloon was suddenly ripped apart, revealing a spinning Rasengan in his hand. He handed Ren a balloon and gestured for him to try. Ren blew up the balloon and focused. Slowly gathering chakra into it, he took his time with the first attempt. The chakra began to spin gradually, taking the shape of the balloon without making it burst. He kept the balance steady, trying to stabilize both the rotation and power. Ren continued practicing the third step without fail, keeping the balloon perfectly stable as it spun. The balloon remained still, confirming his success. Utakata stared at him and then said, "Now that you've completed the 3 steps, all that's left is to combine them without any medium like the balloon." To demonstrate, Utakata once again formed a complete Rasengan in his hand. Ren nodded, stretched out his arm, and began to form his own Rasengan. On his first attempt, he managed to complete the sphere, but when he tried to attack the ground with it, the power wasn't sufficient, leaving only faint marks. Not discouraged, Ren tried again. This time, he focused more on combining rotation, power, and stability without losing control. The Rasengan he created looked almost identical to the one Utakata had shown him. Ren flickered forward and attacked the ground, creating damage similar to Utakata's demonstration, just slightly less powerful. He walked back to his sensei and asked, "How was it, sensei?" Utakata looked at the spot where Ren had attacked, then gave a slow nod. "Good. Keep practicing," he said before flickering away, leaving Ren to continue his training. Ren was satisfied with his progress. He realized that learning the Rasengan had been relatively easy for him due to his advanced chakra control. He also knew that, with his mastery of wind style, creating the Rasen Shuriken would not be too difficult. However, he decided to hold off on developing that technique for now. It would be wise to keep it a secret, as revealing the creation of an S-rank jutsu too soon could draw unnecessary attention. He wasn't afraid of attention he would receive, it was more like bothersome. He continued practicing the Rasengan, refining his control and power. Through experimentation, Ren calculated that using a single Rasengan consumed 800 chakra points, CP, which was almost equivalent to that of an S-rank jutsu. Given his current reserves, he could only use the Rasengan about 8 times if he were at full strength. However, Ren was confident that once he completely mastered the Rasengan, he could reduce the chakra cost significantly. Meanwhile, back at Ren's home, his clones were hard at work, each diligently carrying out their assigned tasks. One of the Fuinjutsu clones was particularly focused on creating a new seal. After working without interruption, the clone finally straightened up, inspecting the intricate design he had just completed. The seal took the shape of a water drop, filled with stable and focus symbols that were interconnected with one another. This seal was specifically designed to counter the negative effects of opening the first gate. In theory, it would help maintain clarity and balance when the gate was activated. The plan was to draw the seal on his forehead so that it would automatically activate when the first gate was opened. However, despite completing the seal, the clone knew it was far from perfect. There were 2 major issues to address. First, he needed to test whether the seal truly worked as intended, otherwise, it would be completely useless. Second, even if the seal proved effective, it was currently too large to fit comfortably on his forehead. The challenge would be to reduce the size without sacrificing its effectiveness. With these thoughts in mind, the clone continued his work, refining and adjusting the seal's structure. The other clones remained equally focused on their own tasks, all working diligently to support Ren's progress. Meanwhile, Ren himself was still outside, immersed in Rasengan practice. Chapter 60. Youth. 2 months had passed since Ren's encounter with Obito and his receipt of the 8 gates and Rasengan techniques. When he went back home after learning the Rasengan, the system awarded him for learning his first A-rank jutsu with 5 advanced level mastery points. Including the previous ones he now had 10 advanced mastery points in total, which meant he could directly push one of his masteries in the advanced level by 20%. During this time, he dedicated himself to improving the 8 inner gates, focusing on employing seals to mitigate their drawbacks. He and his clones worked tirelessly, spending the entire 2 months refining the seal. When they finally succeeded, the process alone boosted his Fuinjutsu mastery by 5%, bringing it to 29%. The seal he developed needed to be drawn on his forehead, as the first limiter was located in the brain. Ren sat in the basement, a single shadow clone positioned in front of him. Today was the day he would finally engrave the seal on himself. He had already conducted numerous tests using clones and was confident that the seal was entirely safe. The clone carefully took out a thin brush, dipped it into chakra ink, and began crafting the intricate pattern on Ren's forehead. Using the entire forehead as his canvas, the clone drew several stable symbols first and then connected them with focus symbols. Although the pattern only used these 2 symbols, the real challenge had been finding the optimal combination to make the seal work efficiently. After 30 minutes of meticulous work, the clone made the final stroke and dispelled itself. As soon as the clone vanished, the seal started to contract on its own, shrinking down to form a small water drop shape in the center of Ren's forehead. This technique of compressing the seal into a small symbol was something Ren had learned from the Fuinjutsu book. It was an advanced trick that used Fuinjutsu itself to condense vast patterns into a manageable size. Satisfied that the seal was complete, Ren stood up and steadied himself. The purpose of the seal that Ren had designed was to stabilize the excess waves of chakra that flood through the body after opening the first gate. Even though the 8 gates is a taijutsu technique, it is still dependent on chakra for function. It is through the excess chakra that is released the body is able to reach its state where it can maintain 100% muscle strength. When the additional chakra is stabilized, the seal then focuses on helping him maintain focus. This is necessary because that additional chakra is like a drug to the human body, since the body is not used to having such high amounts of chakra. The chakra that is released is the latent chakra that the human body has stored inside it but does not use. When the gate is opened, the brain is informed that it can stop suppressing the latent chakra and then release it. When the latent chakra gets released, the body gets induced with a high level of pleasure, due to which it becomes very difficult to maintain focus, which is why, while using the 8 gates, the user is only able to attack using brute force, and their technique is not very sophisticated. To use the 8 gates jutsu, Ren needed to locate the limiters and force them open with chakra. He had already identified all the limiters but had never tried to unlock them. Focusing his chakra through the pathways in his brain, he soon sensed a blockage. Gathering his chakra with the intent to break through in one go, he pushed. The block opened, and an instant wave of clarity washed over him. He felt more alive, his senses heightened, and his strength vastly amplified. The first gate unlocked 100% of his muscle strength, significantly boosting both speed and power. Eager to test it out, Ren moved toward the training dummies in the basement. These dummies were specially designed to absorb and disperse damage, making them practically indestructible. Ren's movements felt almost effortless, even faster than when he enhanced himself with wind chakra. He struck one of the dummies with a powerful punch, and it caved in before returning to its original shape. The force behind his strike was impressive, enough to be comparable to the capabilities of most Jonin, highlighting just how significant the strength boost was. Next, he focused on chakra molding while the gate was still active. Normally, the intense chakra flooding caused by the 8 gates made molding chakra almost impossible, but Ren discovered that he could still manage it, albeit with reduced control. It wasn't as good as the 25% control he had even before the academy, but it was remarkable considering the usual drawbacks of the technique. He realized that the focus seal played a critical role, helping him maintain clarity and basic control, unlike the original technique where molding chakra was completely impossible. Despite the reduced chakra control, Ren was satisfied. This was just his first time using the 8 gates, and with practice, he was confident that he could master it further. He kept the gate open for more tests but noticed that it automatically closed after 15 minutes. Apparently, that was his current limit. When the gate closed, he felt tired but not excessively drained, and his body showed no signs of injury or pain, a clear indicator of the seal's success. It proved that the stable symbols that he had employed in making the seal did their work of stabilizing the flow of excess chakra which would have otherwise caused injuries extremely well. He sat down to analyze how the experiment went. The chakra that was released from start to finish was never unstable. It always flowed in a stabilized manner. Unlike in the original technique, this was also why he was able to maintain his chakra control to some extent. The second point was that he was able to maintain his clarity while the gate opened. Even though it was only the first gate, it proved that his methods of employing Fuinjutsu to improve the 8 gates had worked. He knew that he wasn't the first one who would have thought about employing different methods to make the 8 gates safe. Others would have most definitely tried something, but they didn't continue. Ren was sure if someone like Hiruzen devoted his time, he could have definitely improved the technique, but that's just what it is. Hiruzen does not want to dedicate time to a technique like this because he knows that the benefit of doing so to someone like him would be minimal. Moreover, others didn't have the advantages Ren had with the system and his abuse of the shadow clone. With these 2 things he could continue living an entirely normal life, but his strength would still increase. Ren couldn't help but feel proud of his progress. His efforts to improve the 8 gates technique had paid off remarkably well. Moreover, once the gate closed, the seal on his forehead vanished, leaving no trace behind. This ensured that no one would suspect he had made such an enhancement, keeping his newfound ability a secret unless he used it. Even though Ren had successfully unlocked the first gate, he knew there was still room for improvement, so he wasn't in a hurry to start working on the second gate just yet. To improve it, he would need to rely on his medical knowledge, something that made him sigh as he glanced at one corner of the room, where layers upon layers of books were stacked. When Ren first checked the scroll he had received, he expected around 10 or 20 books at most. To his shock, he pulled out over 100 books, and there were still more left inside the scroll. To confirm whether this was normal, he checked with Yujao and Hitoshi, who had each received only 10 books. Realizing that he had been given a mountain of medical knowledge to master, Ren could only accept it, knowing that it would ultimately lead him to mastering the chakra-enhanced strength technique. To manage the workload, Ren created 3 clones with minimal chakra to handle reading the books. Reading so many books have also given him the mastery of Urojutsu -16%, beginner. However, even with the clone's efforts, he still wasn't finished, and he knew it would take more time. It was likely that when he finished all the books he would reach the basic mastery, and any further increase would require practical work rather than theoretical work. He wanted to speed up the process but couldn't create more clones without compromising his other tasks. The rest of his clones were busy, and he didn't want to stop their ongoing training, as he was seeing consistent improvement in his mastery levels with little to no effort beyond chakra consumption. Ren couldn't help but feel grateful for the system's unique feature that allowed mastery to directly store knowledge into his brain without suffering from the usual headache and migraines caused by using shadow clone jutsu. Without this feature, he knew he would have definitely gone insane trying to handle so much at once. Another month passed, and Ren was almost finished reading all the books, though it would still take a few more days to complete the task. One day, as he was about to leave the training ground after practice, an eagle, which was the signal for an emergency mission, began circling training ground 1. Without hesitation, every member of Team 1 moved toward the gates, despite still being fatigued from the day's training. This swift reaction was something that Utakata had drilled into them from the beginning. The first dispatch squad should always be ready for a mission unless they were in extremely bad shape. Over the past 3 months, Team 1 had been sent on 2 emergency missions, both categorized as B rank. The fact that there were so few emergency missions demonstrated Hidden Lee Village's reputation for thoroughly vetting missions beforehand. If too many emergency missions were dispatched, it would reflect poorly on the village's ability to assess risks properly, thereby endangering its shinobi. Aside from those B-rank missions, Team 1 continued to complete C-rank missions every week but had stopped taking D-rank missions a month after the Obito incident. Now that the team was well coordinated and familiar with each other, there was no longer any need to perform chore-like D-rank tasks. As they reached the village gates, Utakata was about to speak with a gate guard when an Anbu operative suddenly appeared in front of him. The Anbu whispered something into Utakata's ear, and his expression turned serious as he nodded in acknowledgement. Utakata took the mandatory mission form from the gate guard and immediately led his team out of the village. As Team 1 traveled toward the mission location, he began briefing them on the situation. Our mission location is near the border of the Land of Fire, connecting with the Land of Grass, Utakata explained. A shinobi team assigned to a mission in that area has gone missing in action, Mia. Our objective is to investigate their disappearance and, if possible, retrieve them safely. He paused for a moment, allowing his students to absorb the information before continuing. Additionally, an Anbu squad will be joining us en route, he added. This is because an Anbu team has also gone missing in the same area. Although there is no confirmed connection yet, the village suspects that the 2 cases may be linked. Letting that information settle, Utakata gave his final instructions. We will travel non-stop to the mission site, only pausing when we meet up with the Anbu squad. Our orders are to cooperate with them, as both of our teams share the same objective. With that, he took the lead, this time taking his team to their destination. Chapter 61, Everything is an illusion, so there is no point in living. Team 1 continued traveling without stopping, moving swiftly through the terrain. Whenever they came across settlements or travelers, they concealed themselves and pressed forward. After more than 2 days, they reached a point just 3 kilometers away from their mission location. At that moment, Utakata signaled them to halt. Stop, he commanded. This is where we'll meet up with the Anbu squad that we will be assisting. They should arrive in a few hours, so let's take some rest. I'll take the first shift, Yujao will take the second, Hitoshi the third, and Ren will take the last shift. The Gainins nodded in understanding. Unlike their first mission, where Utakata had let them rest fully, their subsequent missions followed a standard shinobi protocol, ensuring equal distribution of rest among team members. The 3 Gainins quickly settled down to recover their energy. A few hours later, Hitoshi woke Ren up for his shift before lying down to sleep. Ren stretched lightly, ensuring his body was in optimal condition, before leaping onto a tree branch. He created 3 shadow clones, which dispersed into the surroundings to scout the perimeter. The clones completed their sweep and dispelled, relaying the information back to Ren. Everything was clear. Over the course of an hour and a half, he repeated this process 3 more times, ensuring constant vigilance. Just as he was about to send his clones out again, he heard a faint squeaking sound. He immediately locked in, and without hesitation woke his team up. Utakata was the first to rise, and at that moment, the squeaking sound echoed once more. He pulled out a flute-like instrument and played a silent tune. Suddenly, 4 Anbu members flickered into position on the surrounding trees. Utakata turned to Team 1. This is an Anbu code signal, he explained. It is used when regular squads have missions with the Anbu. One of the Anbu members, wearing a bear mask, flickered next to Utakata. Ren immediately recognized him. It was the same Anbu operative present during Obito's assault. As Utakata and Bear exchanged words, Ren's eyes scanned the remaining 3 Anbu members. One wore a mantis mask, another had a cat mask, and the last one had a bee mask. All of them wore standard Anbu attire, complete with armor and specialized gear. Ren couldn't deduce much about their abilities, but his system displayed their levels. Cat and Bee were in the 50s range, Mantis had a level of 63, and Bear, the squad leader, had a level of 69. Ren noted that if his own level had been 1 point lower, he wouldn't have been able to see Bear's level at all. This was an elite Anbu squad, with every member at Jonin level strength. Meanwhile, Utakata and Bear began their debriefing. What do we know about the 2 missing squads? Utakata inquired. Bear responded, the first squad, Team Izuka, was led by Izuka Saratobi. Their mission was to gather intelligence from the border patrol team, but the village received a report that Team Izuka never made contact, even after the buffer period had passed. Hidden Leaf Village operated with a standard 24-hour buffer time. If a team failed to check in 1 day past their scheduled contact, It was assumed that something had gone wrong, and the mission status was escalated. Bear continued, an ambush squad was in the area, so they were dispatched to investigate Team Izuka's disappearance. However, they too vanished without making any further contact. Utakata absorbed the information before speaking. If it were just one squad, we could assume that someone went rogue or that there was an unexpected incident. But 2 squads disappearing confirms that there is foul play involved. Do we have any other intel? He asked. Bear shook his head. No. My squad was completing a separate mission in the area, but once we received the alert, we rushed here as quickly as possible after finishing our assignment. Utakata nodded, and the bear said, let's see if the sensors pick up anything. Utakata agreed, and the 2 leaders returned to their teams. Utakata then signaled Hitoshi, while Bear directed the B-Mask Tanbu, sending both ahead to scout the mission area. The rest of the group followed at a slower pace, maintaining caution as they moved forward. The B-Mask Tanbu paused on a tree branch, prompting the rest of the group to halt as well. There's an area of land ahead, he said, scanning the terrain. Its perimeter is subtly separated from the surrounding landscape. At a glance, it looks no different, but if you examine it closely, there's something off. Hitoshi added, the connection with my insects has become extremely weak. Unless I get closer or retrieve them, I won't be able to determine what's interfering with them. Bear turned to Utakata and said, looks like Fuinjutsu is being used here. Utakata nodded solemnly. That's the only possible explanation. He glanced at Ren. Let's go. Ren followed his sensei as Mantis trailed behind. The 3 stopped once they reached the suspected area. Although the terrain looked completely normal, all 3 could sense a disturbance. Ren focused chakra into his eyes, peering more carefully at the ground. Just ahead, a border of Fuinjutsu symbols curved around the area, likely enclosing the entire perimeter that the B-Mask Tanbu had pointed out earlier. The seal was complex, containing a large number of interconnected symbols, more than Ren had ever seen used in a single sealing formula, except for the ones in his basement back home. Mantis examined the markings and commented, the only purpose of this seal is concealment.